bid or request for bids, both were on the same timeline, so there wasn't really an option to choose a quicker timeline, so.
So how do we get, in the future, how do we get to the point where this doesn't happen to us? Because we're essentially losing these funds from the state.
Yeah, I think it would be a matter of having reevaluations done more frequently. So rather than waiting the period that we waited this time around, doing it sooner, so.
And I hope everybody realizes by not having this, this is affecting our mill rate.
It doesn't necessarily affect the mill rate. When you do the reevaluation, it doesn't really decrease the total. It increases it could increase your total valuation, but more or less it shifts the balance of whose property is worth what. And so generally speaking, we see with reevaluations about 1/3 of people's property value goes down, about 1/3 stays the same, and about 1/3 increases. And so it doesn't make the spending is what really is getting in the mill rate. It really ends up equalizing across the board. So it just shifts who's paying.
That's true, but when when each of us individuals receive our tax bill, there's a deduction for the amount that we owe based on our homestead exemption. And every year that I see that homestead exemption, the percentage going down, my bill's going up because of that.
Yeah, and
So
that
it
doesn't
does-
change the mill rate. That changed how much your valuation you're being taxed on.
Okay, it doesn't affect the mill rate, but it affects my tax bill.
Yes, 100%, and that's why we're trying to get that reevaluation done as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Any other questions about page 1? Okay, page 2. We're here now. This talks about our wages, our categorized expenses. So we're covering our wages and benefits. You'll see our total wages and benefits are seeing an increase of 9.9%. Our fixed costs, we're seeing a total increase of 1.6%, and those are things that we really don't have the ability to change from the municipal side. So we can't change the school budget, we can't change the county tax. We are already committed on debt services and our set contracts and fees. We don't have much of a changeover, and we can't change the price of things like utilities and fuel. The only thing we can try to do is adjust the amount that we consume. And so you'll see each one of these is broken down. For example, when we get to fixed cost education, you'll see that we've budgeted for a 6.8% increase. And so annualized, if you look at FY 2024, a $6,088,292 school budget, a 6.8% increase on that is roughly $365,000 extra per year. And so with that value, we then did times it by 1.5 to figure out what 1.5 years worth, because that is something we do pay monthly. When you look at our county tax, it's down 26%, 26.7%. Even though we are budgeting for a 9% increase in county tax. That's what we've received for information from the county. But that's because we only pay that bill once. And so it's not a monthly bill. It's just paid once in this 18-month period. Our contracts and set fees, those are the kind of things that are paid monthly. So we budgeted to do that, just 18 months there. And again, utility and fuel, we budgeted based off of which months and what our usual usage rate is during those months. So that gives us our total fixed cost. Any questions so far? Yeah, Mr. Talbot.
And I know we're just not final yet, but the superintendent's school budget calls for a 5.72%.
Yeah.
So maybe something is, when we get close to finalizing, see where they really are. I mean,
Yeah, and that's, we just didn't want to be in a situation like what's happened in the past where we've underestimated, and last year ended up being a 6.8%. So we carried that number over this year to be conservative with that estimate. So if that comes down, that's a benefit to all of our taxpayers for sure. And then we're getting into what we're calling our variable and discretionary costs. That's our road maintenance, our transfers to reserves, our supplies and equipment, abatements and bad debt, and then community services and all our other expenditures. And those are down 19.4%. So total expenditures work out to being down 0.5%. Any questions on this page? Okay. And so this next page, the next few pages kind of break down where we can really see changes. So things that are fixed costs, like I said, we can't change at the municipal level. We can, as a select board, lower the school budget, lower our county tax, but there are places where we do have a little bit of wiggle room. But what we're trying to show here is that our total fixed costs really account for 74.8% of the budget. And then with that, if you include wages and benefits, that brings it up to 78.2% of the budget. So that 13.4 plus 74.8. So in terms of trying to find ways to cost save here, we're really only dealing with a discretionary budget of about 11.7%. So that's where we can do our wiggle room there, and that's where we kind of focused on. And so there's not a lot of ability to change those big expensive items, but we can look at our estimates for our other items. So got a couple bar graphs on the next page that show that the our revenues, what percentage of our revenues are property taxes and intergovernmental excise tax and other revenues, our wages and benefits and debt services for expenditures. That shows our 2023 actual and our 2024 actual. And again, we're seeing here that a lot of our costs are just fixed. Over 80% of our costs are fixed, so there only leaves 11% and change of wiggle room to really focus on saving money. Those are the only lines we can really cut costs on. All right, so that's kind of the budget as a whole up front. Our advisement to the town manager as he prepared a draft of the budget was that the select board wanted to see a level supply of goods and services, the same thing that we provided last year with very little new. The only thing we requested new was looking into providing increasing capacity in HR services, because the three big liabilities in our town are really legal, financial, and HR. And as we've moved into a town manager form of government, we have staff. We need to bring our HR up to a certain level, and so we want our town manager to spend some time focused more on big rock items like increasing revenues and decreasing expenses. And so he's already done a lot of work on the HR front, but we wanted to provide dedicated staff to focus on that in its entirety. It's pretty standard across municipal governments. HR work is very complex. There's a lot of liability involved, and we want to protect the town by limiting liability. We had said, find us an HR staff person. Thankfully, the town manager went out and just found a consultant who can do it at about 1/5 of the rate, because they are just built for these sorts of things and helping other local municipalities. So that was some really nice savings that we found right there. And then the other thing we directed the town manager to prepare was a salary adjustment for our staff that does not exceed 3.5%, which is the Northeast Cost of Living Index. And we picked that number because we wanted to just have something set. I want to give you perspective. As you all know, generally in employment, you're up for evaluation every 12 months, and that's when you can see a salary adjustment. Well, we are essentially saying to the staff, because we're in the 18-month budget, a year from now, you're not up for a salary adjustment again. You're locked in for a year and a half at this salary. And so the staff are unfortunately going to have to eat whatever that difference looks like. If there is a increase in inflation and that cost of living adjustment doesn't cover everything at 18 months that we expected it to cover at 12 months. But we weren't comfortable with capturing a year and a half worth of salary adjustments. We just wanted to hold that at a 1 year line that's in line with the cost of living adjustment. So, yeah.
So, I know in the past we've had discussions about just straight across the board increases, or are people actually getting evaluated and getting merit?
It's variable, and so we were just letting the town manager know that the total increase that we were willing to accept on wages across the board, if so, was 3.5%. That doesn't mean everyone's getting a cost of living adjustment or that percentage. It's variable. And so we're not really at liberty in a public setting to go into individual, the select board can't go into individual people's salaries and stuff like that because of the laws relating to personal privacy. But it's not every person is getting that across the board. It's evaluated person by person, and that's just the total amount that we were willing to accept during that time.
Someone may get 1% and another one may get 6%.
Potentially, yeah.
As long as they're-
Yeah, and it goes off of annual reviews and things like that, so.
I understand the northeast factor of 3.5%, but I want to kind of talk about people that are retired
Mm-hmm,
and on Social Security. Granted, Social Security said it was going to go up 2.5.
mm-hmm,
Mine went up 2.3.
mm-hmm.
Then I took out Medicare. My payment for Medicare went up 5.9. So my 2.3, I'm talking specifically for me and other people that are on Social Security. So my original Social Security, oh, you said, oh, 2.3 is not too bad, but Medicare went up 5.9. So my 2.3 went down to 1.9. You're talking about people on fixed income,
Mm-hmm.
and you're asking for 3.5.
Yeah, we are recommending 3.5% total across the, not across the board, but as an aggregate for our staff, yes.
And more than that for the town manager.
Yeah, we gave the town manager a salary adjustment as well this
And
year.
more for the fire chief.
What's that?
And more for the fire chief.
We adjusted our salary based off of the market, and the direction from us was 3.5% in the aggregate and in line with duties and responsibilities, so.
But overall, no more than 3.5 for the entire.
For the aggregate, yes.
No, that's not true.
That's what
Somebody
we
could-
said, yes.
For the aggregate, but you could have somebody that's going up 4%.
Well, you can't give the chief
and
more than
somebody
3.5%,
going
the
1%.
town manager more than 3.5%, aggregate 3.5.
Yes, you can.
So you're gonna give up,
Where the hell?
that's interesting.
Well, so there might be some people in there who aren't getting it, any adjustment, and across the board, so,
Really?
yes. But again, I'm not here to discuss individual people's salaries, I'm here to discuss the budget line, yeah,
That's
Joe?
interesting.
yeah.
So, I guess I'm a little confused because on page 2, wages and benefits, you said 3.5%, but administration is 15% and fire department is 16%.
Yeah, so
Like nobody's 3.5%.
well, perfect example is fire calls are up over 12% from last year. And so there's also if your wage increases, but the number of hours people are working is increasing by 12%, that's gonna make more increase right there. So it's not necessarily just the number that they're being paid is increasing, but the amount of hours and the amount of service being provided is increasing as well. Because that was the first thing I looked at too. I was like, what's going on here? And then it's like, well, there's more calls. I mean, we can get into that when we get into that section, but you know, we get regular updates from the fire chief, and for the last 3 years, we've seen upper single digit or double digit increase in calls every year. And so it's just building that into our model. You know, we see that increasing. We have a lot of people aging in place, and so there's a lot of calls related to that. We have more houses. Those sorts of calls, just it takes a lot more staff and a lot more time.
And the administrative?
Yeah, the administrative, we have also gone from a couple part-time people being moved into a full-time category because we had a resignation this year. And so that has some adjustment for hours there. Jerry, do you want to elaborate at all about the?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so we had a resignation, and to backfill, we brought the 2 people that were part-time up to full-time. That netted a little bit of hours in the office in that change, so it's more hours.
Hold on, you
Just
lost
seeing the
one.
part-time went down.
Yeah.
So the part-time's gone, so.
Yeah.
Okay, but you lost one full-timer, now you have 2 full-timers.
Well, we had 2 part-timers, and then we lost 1 full-timer, and we brought those 2 part-timers up to full-time.
So really what the increase is benefits then?
Yes.
Yes, there's an increase in, so again, I know you're not asking, but I can't go into individual people's benefits, but when you have people go to full-time, it is an increase in benefits depending on what benefits they take, so that's where that's captured. So our goal was to limit salary adjustments on the aggregate to that 3.5%, but that doesn't mean that it's going to show as 3.5% across the aggregate because of increased hours and increased benefit costs.
On this, you guys chose to pay the family medical leave at 1%. You guys chose to pay the whole one and not give half for the people to pay the half. So does that 3.5, so you're actually given 4?
No, that's built into that calculation, so.
So you're actually down to 3?
Yeah, is that correct, Jerry? No, sorry, that could be
So we're up to
3%. Because the Family Medical Leave Act kicked in, and the employers are having to pay a 0.5% for their staff to fund a family medical leave fund at the state level, and employers have the option to cover the full 1% or only cover the 0.5%, and we chose as a select board to cover the full 1% for folks.
The only problem is if you cover that now and the state decides that's not enough money and they jump it way up, you're on the hook for all the rest of that too.
If the state increases that, we would be able to reevaluate that. Yeah, because we're only budgeting to cover 1%. So if that were to increase, we're not budgeting for that. That would fall on the employees.
Okay, so the half is definitely, it's on the 3.5,
Yep.
the half is on
Yep,
top
and
of
that's
that.
over the 18 months. So we felt like that was fair because there's not an annual review process that they would normally get after 1 year, and so that we felt like that was a good way to capture the increased salary over this 18-month period. You see what I'm saying? Like, usually we'd have that 12-month review period, and then you might get potentially another adjustment. And since they're not going to have that 4% with the 0.5% being covered is reflective of that 18 months. So,
Alan?
Planning and code enforcement, because that is a 4.6% increase, does that reflect additional hours?
can we? Where's that? 4 point. That's going to be the second line down. And Jerry, can you address that?
What
Well,
page
that
are you
doesn't
on?
address
What page are you
any-
The wage and benefits.
Doesn't address any
Page 2.
additional
Good,
hours.
right.
Last year, George, the planner got left off
Oh, I
the
see.
calculation for an increase, so he got his increase even though he got left off last year's amount.
Yeah,
So basically, you're saying it wasn't budgeted.
Right,
for
it wasn't
last
budget, right.
it wasn't budgeted for last year, but budgeted for this year.
Okay.
Any other questions on this page?
We're on 6, right?
Yes, we're starting 6.
Someone brought me back to page 2, but I think we're back
Yeah,
on page
I
6.
think we're on
now.
to page 6.
Yeah.
Can I just add to the conversation about the full percent around family medical leave, was that part of the discussion that we have at length about is that we want to retain our employees. I know a lot of people take issue with comparing what we're doing to other towns, right? But the reality of the situation is, if our town employees can leave and go to the next municipality over to get some of those benefits, we want to retain our employees. We don't want to keep starting over. And so we looked at that as a way to support the town staff and keep our employees here rather than constantly being in this, we have to train someone new, we have to train someone new, we have to train someone new. I believe, Jerry or Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the expense to the town as a whole to do the full percent versus the 0.5% was like $12,000. Do you remember?
Well, it would have been 6.
6, yeah.
12,000 total. So to cover the other half was 6,000.
Yeah.
So for us to match what the state is doing and also what surrounding municipalities are doing
Mhm.
across the board, the entire expense for that came in at $6,000.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
just to
Heather-
give some context as to why we made that decision the way that we did.
Yeah, Heather brings up a really good point. What we don't want, we want to make sure that we're providing a work environment that retains people. Replacing employees is very expensive because of the amount of time with training and then the onboarding and then finding the person and then being down-staffed for a while. And so we want to make sure that we're not in a situation that some smaller municipalities fall into where they essentially train people and get them really competitive for a job and then they leave to go to a nearby municipality. You know, we just have the challenge of our location, like within a 25-minute drive, there's just a lot of town offices that have staff openings. There's a lot of positions open. So we're just trying to make sure that we're being competitive, but also being responsible. And that's where we think a cost of living adjustment is responsible. And then that 0.5% as well, so.
No.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say that we're assuming that employees that we have currently would leave if they don't get this increase.
No, that's not what we're assuming.
That's what I hear.
No, I mean, I think that even without worrying about a threat of an employee leaving, it's still important as an employer to just make sure that you're providing a competitive wage and providing the resources that makes an employee want to stick around. And so it happens at every level of businesses. They're not necessarily worrying about someone being poached from their entity, but just making sure that you're getting good staff, training them well, and making sure that you're providing them with something that a livable wage that they can live off of. 3.5% cost of living adjustment really isn't a wage increase. It's just providing them with the same income and the same buying power this year as last year. And if frankly, if we're not coming back and adjusting that again at the 1 year mark, which we're not, it's not even guaranteed to provide them the same buying power 18 months from now as they have right now. So that's why we came up with 3.5%, because it's an 18-month budget and we wanted to keep this as lean as possible.
But they still could leave if they were offered a position somewhere else.
Yeah, I think anyone
at a
could
higher
leave a
price.
position at any time for a
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
competitor. Yeah.
At a lower price.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So any more questions about, we're on page 6 now, so about funding sources, we can start this conversation here. Is everyone on page 6? Unfortunately, we tried to print these out on a larger page because I know that we wanted comments, but when you add the notes section, it kind of squeezes everything. So I apologize for the small font. We were thinking of trying to print it out on a big page, bigger pages, but it just didn't lay out. And so if anyone here's eyes are kind of like mine, you got to squint a little bit on these small numbers, but we can repeat anything and they're all available here. I almost brought a magnifying glass tonight to take a look at this. So, total excise tax, we expect it to be up 4.5%. We annualize that amount at $1,149,333. Does anyone have any questions about that excise tax? I can't call on you, so.
Yes.
1161.05 other excise. It actually went down 50% between 2023 and 2024, yet you're expecting it to over double this year. Why?
I don't see the decrease of 50% between 2023 and
6.2 to 4,000.
Yeah.
6.2 to 4,000. Yeah.
35%.
Yeah, well, we have budgeted just for an expectation of a little bit more. Do you want to address that number?
Yeah, I mean, any of the revenue items can be adjusted.
Mhm.
They were just basically,
Yeah, so other
general estimates.
excise tax are things like snowmobile registrations, boat registrations, stuff like that.
Right.
We felt like that was a number reflective of an 18-month period. It's a 20% change, but it's a relatively small number, and when we're talking under $10,000, and so we're just wanted to make sure that we estimate accordingly.
Right, but if you do it in a few spots, it adds up.
Yeah,
So I guess
understandable.
I'm just kind of curious if we're guesstimating why it's not a more realistic guesstimate.
I think that we're just basing it off the 2023 actual, because that is a fair number to base it off of, even if the 2024 actual was a little bit lower, just based off of general trends. So it could have been a low year last year, less boats, less snowmobiles,
So this is something new that we're using, creating revenues or actually counting on revenues coming in. So my only concern would be what happens if something like COVID hits and excise taxes or everything's down because of that, because people aren't driving and they're not buying new cars. And it hit us in a couple of years past. So my concern would be that if we're budgeting for this, with this expectation, I hope we're being really conservative with that, because it could screw us at the end if.
Yeah, we feel like just budgeting for $1,000 additional revenue there is a fair estimate and a conservative one. And that's over the course, that extrapolated over the course of 18 months, it's $9,000.
But that's the other excise, I'm thinking motor vehicle excise.
Yeah, well, do you want to explain why we use that number, or do you want me to?
Yeah, no, in general, the revenues are in total, or the estimated non-tax revenues in total are on the conservative side. So in this particular case, other excise, because it's so small, I didn't even really consider it when looking at the actuals. But it is a fair point that if it were 6,000, maybe that would be closer to reality
but
I'm
compared
not
to
talking
4,000.
I'm talking about the motor vehicle.
No, I get that. What I'm saying is, in total, for the non-property tax revenues, if you were going to ask me, is it a fair estimate? My answer would be, it is a conservative estimate, not a liberal estimate. And primarily for that reason, that you don't really want to overestimate your revenues. You don't want to be too far off in either direction, right? You do want to be pretty close to where you think you'll end up. But if you're going to be off, it's better to be off slightly underestimating revenues than it is to be slightly overestimating revenues.
Yeah, and then for the.
So in
your-
total, my comment would be that your overall non-tax revenues are probably conservative.
In the motor vehicle excise, like, people still have to register the vehicle they own. So if there was some sort of disaster, people still have to register their vehicle in that 18-month period unless they decide to get rid of their vehicle. So we think that that's a conservative estimate, and just up 4.4%. So,
Thank you.
good question though.
So what happens if, on the motor vehicle, I want to be on the other side of that, say our excise is higher? Granted, where this, our projection is for this budget, if it is higher, to those additional funds, do they carry over to next year?
Yeah, they just add to the surplus.
Yeah, they add to the surplus, and then we'll get to that later, but we're trying to make sure that we're utilizing the surplus in a way that whatever we're taking in the previous year, we're taking that into consideration. But before last year, that surplus kind of built in because we weren't estimating revenues, so we're over. And this iteration of the board felt like that looked like an over taxation because you're building that surplus and not applying it. And so one thing that's important to us is that we're taking into consideration if there's a surplus at the end of the year, and making sure that's getting rolled over into the next year to provide that back to the taxpayers, because we don't want to get into the habit of holding on to taxpayer money and saying we already have your money to pay for this, but we still want you to give us more money to pay for this, because it's just not the way that you run a municipal budget. So
Thank you.
So next we're going into permits and fees. So you can see we have some increases here on our fees. And that is because we, as a board, adjusted the fee cost this year pretty much across the board. We realized it'd been several years since permits, like building permits, subdivision permits, things like that had been adjusted. And so our code enforcement officer and our board sat down and took a look at what the cost of doing business in the other surrounding towns are, taking into consideration that Durham's still a different town than our surrounding towns. Looking at Pownell, some towns with more development, sometimes towns with less development, and we found that we were really under on a lot of these fees. And so we adjusted the fee schedule to be what we considered a more fair fee schedule, and that's what we saw an increase in revenue from that, and we're expecting that will continue over the next 18 months. And we'll start doing an annual consideration of those fees, because we just think that that's a way that where we can increase revenue for the community is looking at things like those developments and stuff like that. So. And one real quick thing too is we realized that some of the fees were taking up more of the staff person's time than it was valued at. So if someone's paying a fee that's only $20, but it takes a staff person 4 hours to do that task, it's an unfair cost carried by the rest of the community for someone's task. So that's why we adjusted some of those fees. We took a look at how much our staff were putting into it. So.
What was the timeline on that again, when those were adjusted, July?
I think we adjusted them partway. Yeah, I think it was like July or August. So, sorry, Jill.
Jill?
So, okay, I thought I had heard at the last board meeting that it was May. Because I was kind of curious about the code enforcement fees. They pretty much stayed flatline, even with fee increases this year. So again, I'm asking the question, why are you expecting the hike to be so high?
Yeah, because we'll have 18 full months of those increased fee collection, as opposed to just partway through last year adjusting it and then having that. So based off of if we get the same number of applications that we did last year, and every single one of those is exposed to that increased fee cost, we expect that our revenues from those will go up over that 18 month by that margin. So. Okay. And again, like Mark said, our estimates are conservative, So this is, saying we expect probably a little bit more for fees, but we want to budget conservatively in case there's not as much activity happening and that sort of stuff, so.
Well, I do thank you guys for finally increasing the fees.
Yeah, that was a big thing for us, is because we have heard that from a lot of folks. And so we sat down and we started the discussion, but it took us a couple meetings to get through it because it was a lengthy discussion and required a lot of information. So some of those fees were changed one meeting, and some of them weren't changed for another meeting or two meetings. So, I mean, we heard from our code enforcement officer, like when they made the change on some of them, by the next meeting, people were already coming in and paying those previous fees. So, excuse me. Do you all have anything to add on the permits or fees line? Yeah, and so that's where we were happy to see that we have a 36% increase there on the permits and fees. So any other questions there? Okay, intergovernmental. So you might be saying, Joe, if there's all this increase in local fees, why is the total revenue down there? And that's because we put the notes in here. Some of these are only paid to us once a year. And so, as you can see, like our homestead exemption, for those who are unaware, when you get your homestead exemption, you get X amount of dollars taken off the valuation of your home before you pay your taxes. That lost revenue is reimbursed to us. At a certain percentage of that is reimbursed to us at the state. It's not 100% of the lost revenue. It's just, I think it's 72%. But if we're only collecting that once during the 18-month period. And that's the same with like business equipment tax exemptions, veterans exemptions, tree growth, and local road assistance program. And so same thing with tree growth. When a municipality has someone in tree growth, their property is valued at the value of the forest products on the property, and that is oftentimes much lower, especially in a municipality that has that's near population centers. It is much lower than the normal valuation. So there's a lot of lost revenue from the town there to the benefit of the landowner, and the state reimburses a portion of that. And so we're only collecting that once in this 18-month period. And so you'll see there, that's why we're expecting a 17% decrease in intergovernmental collection there. And then state revenue sharing is calculated.
Excuse me.
No.
Neil?
I was gonna say, should that note on that be decreased each year?
Say what?
Should the note on state revenue sharing be decreased each year?
No, it's just a 6% decrease annualized.
No, the note says.
The note.
Estimating 3% increase.
Oh, it says, that might
Oh,
just be a
yeah,
typo
in
from
the-
whomever put the note in there.
That was from an original that I forgot to delete. That was
Yeah.
from an original note, the first kind of go-around that
Yeah.
Jerry and I had with the amounts. This 900,000 is based off of
Yeah.
actuals for FY '24, but then just on Monday, the state economist just released their projections for FY '26, meaning the state's FY '26, which is from July to June of next year, and they're projecting 614,000 for that 12-month period, or 617, something like that, which if you were to do a year and a half, it'd be around 925,000. And Jerry asked me, he said, do you think we should increase that? We could. Really from my perspective, on these revenue items, that you would, personally, I would really only focus on the large dollar ones if you want to suggest or make a recommendation to adjust the revenue estimates, because there is value in getting closer to what will be, what we think will be the real revenue. There's not a significant impact other than helping us to plan in future budget years, right? There's no real impact on actuals, right? There's no impact on actuals based off of what our estimates are. It doesn't really impact the fund balance, because the fund balance is going to be what it's going to be based off of what we actually take in. So it really is just more of a planning tool for managing the town's unassigned fund balance in the long run. So there is some value to getting those closer to actual, but again, as I said earlier, we would still want to err on the side of being more conservative than more.
But isn't another value that if you underestimate revenue too much,
That's
you're
correct.
making it up for it in property tax.
That's correct. And that's why you don't want to be too far off in either
Yeah.
So
direction.
there is that value
That's correct.
besides just the.
But if-
That's correct.
If we were to increase this from 900,000 estimated revenue to 925,000 estimated revenue spread across the taxpayers, it wouldn't be a large difference there. But those are things we keep track of because, like you said, Jill, like 1,000 here, a couple thousand there could add up to, 50 or 100 or 200,000 at the end of the budget. And so that's something we keep in mind when we make those. That's why we didn't say, well, let's just underestimate at 800 instead of 900 if we think it might be as much as 925. The thing with state revenue sharing is it varies and it's a calculation. And so as you all know who've been on the budget committee for a while, it's different each year. And so this is just what we decided to go with for an estimate to kind of split the difference and get close. Phyllis?
What is the local road assistance program? What is that?
Jerry or Mark, do you want to take that response?
It's 9% of the budget, transportation budget at DOT, and they disperse that out to the towns based on center line miles of road. So each municipality gets. local
Oh,
road
so
assistance.
because we plow or whatever, we
Right.
take care of the roads? Okay.
Yes.
It's more specific,
Right.
specifically to
Capital.
maintain roads and sidewalks and bridges, and you have to report back to the state every month how you used it. You can set it aside if you wanted to,
Okay.
but, so there are specific uses for it, but the town ends up using it every year as
Okay.
part of their general operations.
Okay, thank you.
Let me get back to homestead exemption. In 23, you notice the difference between 23 and 24 actuals? And we're not going to be doing a reval until 27. So it really looks to me that our budget for homestead exemptions is quite a bit too high.
40,000 difference between.
I think that's because it's
Because we're
18
gonna,
months.
I believe the percentage will drop
only
again
collected
this
once.
year.
Well, that says 1 year.
Oh,
So, but you're anticipating an increase, and I don't think that will happen.
Yeah, well, we do see increases in number of houses in town over the course of the year as well.
We only
So-
had 11 last year.
Yeah, but again, it's just the estimate we came up with based off of that increase and the expected decrease. And so this is, if you want to make a suggestion to change that number there based off of your calculations, more than welcome to.
Well, even with that argument, from 23 to 24, we had an increase in houses, but yet we went down on homestead.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just concerned that we're over projecting that,
Yeah, so,
probably by,
50,000.
well,
no,
I
the
wouldn't go
difference,
that high.
the actual was 262,000 and we're projecting 275,000,
I know.
which is only,
But when
Yeah,
I'm-
but what you're saying is-
I'm
what you're saying
comparing
is
23
the-
to 24.
And what you're
There's been
saying
a
is the
reduction in those
expectation
2
is that the
years.
reduction will
Yeah.
continue.
yeah, and so that's a place, if you want to make a recommendation to make a decrease there, more than welcome to.
Did you say we have an estimate of what it's gonna be this year? We don't know anything yet.
No.
Because that's all based off of valuations assessed, people
Well-
first and all that.
That's the other thing too, is depending on if someone's property gets evaluated at a sale or something like that, we're seeing that increase as well, so, that's why we went with that number, but.
Thank you.
Anybody, Mark? Okay, do we have any more questions about intergovernmental, expenses? Or sorry, intergovernmental funding sources? Okay, if seeing none, we can move on to page 7. And so now this is charges for services where we're covering like our Eureka rental fees, which represents 18 months of expected fee rental, our junkyard fees, user fees and trash tags, cable franchise fees, ambulance fees, and then miscellaneous charges for services. Excuse me, sorry. So we expect that those funding sources will be down 10%, 10.9%. And that's 153,313 annualized. Do we have any questions on that? Yeah.
so with ambulance fees, we're utilizing a new business to get our payments.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm kind of surprised to see you're anticipating
Yeah.
it going down, not going up, or at least staying the
Yeah,
same.
do we want to have Chief answer that question, or do you want to answer
Especially
it,
since
Jerry?
everybody's getting older and supposedly using the ambulance more.
And we're seeing 12% increase, so that's a good question.
I don't know if the chief,
Chief, do you have a response for that question?
I can, you're looking at ambulance fees?
Yeah, 14-6470.
Mr. Chair, would you like to, move, get another seat?
We'll put you in the hot seat here.
Warm it up.
So that, it's just a valid point, Jill. It's the, I don't want to say guesstimation, and it's not mine. Certainly Mark, the town manager, is just trying to see what the revenue projection would be. I did it out, if you do the 117 times 1.5, you would get 176, 670. That could be more realistic, but with Medicare, Medicaid, and the pennies on the dollar that we've been seeing, it can fluctuate. I think we're at 95,000 currently outstanding, and it's not, on these ambulance fees, don't get locked into 1 year or 18 months. It just continues even backwards to collections and whatnot, so it's just an ongoing process, actually, since I've been here. So that could easily go up, and I would expect it to, just as you said. Our fees are standard, they're equal to this area, so they're not high. We are having a good collection of those through the company, Comstar. And our ambulance call volume's up significantly, so that very well could be up to 176. They chose the 135 for the fiscal, so 41,670, but that's your choice if you want to add that to the projected. Everything changes, right? If we collect less, then that's on us, and if we collect more, then that's better for you all.
And each individual call changes as well. So lift assist might have a higher, if we're getting a lot more lift assist, there might be a higher personnel cost because there's more people responding for a lift assist, but there might not be a collection of a fee or service as part of that. If we're getting very serious car accidents, which we hope we don't get a lot of, and there's very high level service provided by paramedics and transportation and stuff like that, that could be more expensive. If it's a fender bender and we're putting on a Band-Aid and something like that, it just fluctuates based off of the nature. So this is a little bit of a conservative estimate.
I thought the ambulance fees was just the transportation fee. I thought it had nothing to do with the services provided.
Oh, I get you. No, not at all. Almost like your business. So BLS, which would be an EMT, that is a lower rate than, and then there's 2 ALS. So a paramedic level has 1 or 2. And they also bill by the mile. So that's $22 per mile. We go to the 5 hospitals. So if they want to go to Maine Med, their doctors are to Maine Med, or it's appropriate care to go to Maine Med pediatrics, sometimes we're up to 30 miles times the 22.
Okay.
So there is a staggered system of that.
Okay.
And then what they do, cardiac monitor, cardiac drugs, or just, as he said, a transport, a BLS transport.
Okay.
If this is for Chief, I can keep him in the hot seat. So.
Perfect.
It is, actually.
So
Stay there. So because we offer our services to other towns, if we transport for another town, do we bill that town as well?
That's a
or-
great question. Yes. So when Durham transports, we bill. We're the transporting agency, if you will. We bill, and that includes mutual aid. So if we get called mutual aid and we transport, then we bill. The reciprocal is when we call mutual aid into town and they transport, they get the bill.
Yep.
But yes,
Okay.
that does happen.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Not for chief. Is this, the 135,000, all those numbers in that column, are they 18-month, or are they?
Yes.
So, I guess, my thought would be that 135,000 seems to be really low if we're talking about 18 months. It was 117,000 last year for 12 months. now you're saying 100, so only 20,000 more for 6 more months. That would seem to me to be
Yeah, it's a
a number
conservative.
that we could,
It-
maybe way too
It,
conservative.
it's a conservative estimate because of the high variability of the call. So like if we're getting, you know, very serious calls and we're getting a whole string of people need to go get life-saving care down to Portland, yeah, that number could be huge if and I hope every call doesn't become that serious, but yeah, so with that huge fluctuation in what a call could cost, felt like it's more appropriate to be on that conservative side. And so it's admittedly a conservative estimate.
Okay, we talked about it in, I guess, later.
Yeah,
too.
we're just answering how we got those numbers. What you all want to do with recommendations is your prerogative.
Yeah.
Jane?
Neil?
No, Jane.
I think this is slightly connected. If you go back to the budget summary page, Mark, would you rather suggest we mess with funding source increases where they're realistic, as opposed to using fund balance to decrease taxes?
Yeah, so, you know, as part of this process, looking at these numbers and the questions being asked, my suggestion would be to make a proposal to adjust the revenue amounts to something that you feel is that the committee feels is more realistic, and isn't too conservative. So for example, adjusting other excise tax, perhaps adjusting state revenue, homestead exemption, ambulance fees, interest on property taxes is probably a little bit more than it probably should be. In interest income, Jerry and I actually talked about that because interest income, I don't know what interest rates are gonna do over the next 18 months. So that one was intentionally, we looked at the actuals and we're like, well, it's already 112,000 for an entire year. We really don't know what interest rates are gonna do. But if the committee feels it's something where they would want to estimate higher, again, I would say do your estimates as best you can for each, your recommendations for each line, with an eye on the overall total funding sources to see whether or not that makes sense from an estimation point, as opposed to adjusting the unassigned use of fund balance.
And we can hop right there into like the interest income conversation. So that again is a very conservative estimate. We have a locked-in interest rate of 5%.
I went down,
It was locked in for 5% for 6 months, and so your all's guess is as good, if not better than mine, when what interest rates are going to do and what we can get locked in. Jerry negotiated very aggressively, and we moved our money from one bank to another to get this interest rate that we have right now. It was well over $100,000 of increased revenue. We're just being conservative with that because we don't know what interest rates are going to be, and if interest rates tank, we don't want to be overestimating. Again, we want to be responsible for the fiscal impact on individuals, and we're feeling that a little bit more conservative on the estimate of revenues is a better option there, and so that's why we're coming up with these numbers. So I don't have the interest rate crystal ball. If I did, I'd sell that information for profit.
I have a question about the cable franchise fees.
Can you give me the line number?
Yeah, it is.
146460.
1464. Yeah, cable franchise fees. Go ahead.
Okay, so, my question is, on page 18 of,
You're jumping
I don't know
ahead.
what page 18 is, but
Yep.
page 18 shows the reserve accounts. And it looks like this past year, we got $9,703. So is that the difference, that's what was left over that went into the reserve account, or is that what we actually collected?
I'm actually gonna have to look at that.
Yeah.
I know I did look at it. I don't remember what that was, but
So-
it wasn't the franchise. I don't believe it was the
That's
franchise.
that's not the franchise fee there.
So franchise fee is what fills the telecommunications as far as I
Reserve.
thought, correct?
It has in the past.
Yeah.
Okay, so, well, in the past, so
Yeah, I don't.
I'm old, Yeah,
Yeah.
Heather? Oh, sorry.
On page 18, that 9,703, I think that was the leftover ARPA.
Oh, was that what it
I
was?
think that that's that amount that we were, I think that is, if I recall correctly.
We can get that answer for next week. I
Okay,
mean,
so
for your next meeting,
I
yeah.
have another part of that though. So with that
just
said,
like
then, the cable franchise fees went from 42.5 to 27.5. And I think that's because people are ditching cable and streaming. So are we looking, that 41.8, is that for 18 months?
Yes, that's the 18-month estimate.
So, you know, that's just,
So that $9,700 was some cash receiving done back in last February. I don't have the details here, I'd have to look at what it was.
okay, so with that said though, that if you aggregate, I think you're using that term.
Annualize.
Annualize.
Lots of A terms.
Okay, so if we're annualizing that, we are staying flat from last year.
Let me do the math here. I'm not texting, I'm just using my calculator.
Well, yeah, like within $50.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, so franchise fees, I believe, only comes in once a year.
Yeah, and that's fine if it
Oh,
comes
yeah.
in once a year, but what I'm saying is I think more people ditched their cable
Oh, yeah, yeah.
from last year to going forward, so I think we're too high on that, but.
And if it only comes in once a
Yep.
year, are we expecting 2 payments?
No, we're only expecting one payment.
So we
Within
gotta
the 18
definitely
month- within
adjust
the
that
18
then
month
too.
period.
Well, it depends on when it comes in, right?
Yeah, that's true. Right, 'cause
Yeah,
I
we-
think it comes in the fall.
Yeah.
So if it comes in the fall, it'll come in next fall, but then we won't see it within.
And so is this reflective, this shows reflective of more than one, if we're only expecting 27?
I actually think that the 9,000 that's in the, again, I'll have to look at it, I think the 9,000 that's in the telecommunications reserve is actually a partial payment of this total franchise fee. And it should be added to that 9,000.
So it should be transferred there, yep.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
my
but
guess.
we
without
we
looking
can
at
get
the
that
details.
answer for next meeting.
All right, thank you.
Which means it would go down as well.
At the same time, on the same subject, is there, once that information comes in, do they tell you how many houses they supply that to?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Is there any trend from, with Fidium coming on board, and a lot of people signing up for streaming
Yeah.
versus cable? It'd be nice to know if there's a trend or downward trend on that from them. I would think that they would know that as a business. I certainly would want to know it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's a good question.
It'd be interesting to know if they do have that information readily available too.
Mm-hmm.
And would a follow-up question be, should Fidium be paying a cable franchise fee?
They're not
cable.
providing cable. It's just,
So it's
they're
actual
just, they're
cable,
just, that's just
not
internet, yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else?
What's on the interest on property taxes? What is the interest rate on that?
7%.
7%?
I think that's what you guys, it's something that's voted on at town meeting every year.
Okay.
I believe it was 7%.
Whatever the allowed amount is.
Right, yeah.
And again, like we said, this interest income is a very conservative estimate, just because we don't know. So if the budget committee wants to take a stab at the interest rate and come up with a different number, more than welcome to hear that recommendation. So,
What dollar amount are you using
for what?
for CD? How much is?
It's not a CD, it's a,
It is
well,
a
it's a, yeah, I thought we had one of them in a high yield savings account though.
No, they're all CDs.
Okay, my-
So they are CDs and
They're around 5%.
right now they're
Yeah.
5%, but.
How long they locked in?
I mean, how
6
much-
months.
One's
I
already
think it was
insured.
1.5 million. I
Mhm.
thought.
Right, two of them were, they were both 1.5 million, one was for 3, one was 6. The one for 3 is already matured, the one that's for 6 ends in March.
Mm-hmm.
So what'd you relock in at? Sorry.
5%.
5%.
How much money is available to put in the CD is what I'm asking?
3 million?
3 million, but that'll drop as the year goes on, as we eat through cash.
Mhm.
So it's 3 million right now because we just received
Yeah.
a whole bunch of tax revenue.
Mhm.
So can I ask another question? Did you say that when that 3-month came up, it re-upped at
No,
5%?
no, because we need that cash to pay the bills.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why one's 6 month, one's 3 month, just to manage cash flow, yeah.
Thank you.
Can I call
But,
somebody
but,
on?
but it, what's nice about what really made our current bank upset was, they were only giving us like 0.85%. And they really should have been giving us the higher interest rates because they went up for a while. So when I moved it, they decided they were gonna match even our regular checking account gets that higher rate on us, so it all worked out in the favor of the town. for
Kind of
sure.
sad we have to ask for it.
Yeah,
And they were not happy that I moved it, so.
yeah, I think Jerry had a couple of VPs at each other's throats over it, so, we want more interest.
Yep.
Did you have something to add about this
I
line,
just,
Heather?
the thing that I wanted to add is that this is, such a beneficial move for 2 reasons. One, the increased revenue from the interest, and also the fact that we don't have to pay interest to get us through the year to pay
Mhm.
our bills, right? So that's
Yeah.
like a win-win for- regarding this very specific,
Mhm.
very specific line.
Alrighty. So we're seeing that our total funding resources are down about 3%, but like we said, we highlighted a couple places where we were very conservative with our estimate, and if you all want to make a recommendation to be a little bit more liberal with the estimate there, that's your prerogative. So just letting you know why we chose those numbers. Any more questions on page 7? We're halfway through. It might just be a 1 meeting situation, right? Alrighty. So funding requirements, general government. You can see we're up about 14.1%, and then administration, that's up 13.8%. Assessing is down 4.4%. Information technology, that is up 54% because we changed our provider for our IT. We were so the IT services that the town had been using over the last few years exposed us to significant risk, and like for hacking and things like that. And so we went and tried to mitigate that risk by getting a more robust IT service. And then planning and code enforcement is up 3.8%. Any questions on 20, 23, 26, or 27?
Sorry.
Yeah, don't be sorry.
So 3.8%, what's up besides payroll that's 3.5?
That can all be seen in the details. This is just on the next page or the next 2 pages.
Yeah, we'll see that.
You'll see the individual lines.
Yeah. And so, public safety, fire department's up 13.4%, other public safety's up 3.7, with a total public safety increase of 13.1. Again, we're gonna go into details in subsequent pages on these as well. Public works, down 3.6%, municipal buildings up 56%, solid waste up 24.4%, with a total change of 2.9%. Community services, we're seeing a down 96%. And that's because we didn't get many requests for money, but also we have a recreation account already funded with more money than is right here. So rather than allocating more money for recreation, we already can distribute that out of the recreation reserve. So we didn't feel the need to fund for more money this year. So.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
you may not have that authority next year.
Yeah, correct. So if we don't have that authority, then we didn't get requests in a timely manner this year for anything. No one came in for the free, the scholarship fund. I know a member of the committee told the baseball committee to reach out to us and ask for more money, but that came in too late for this year, so we just didn't allocate that. So if we don't have the authority to distribute out of reserve accounts next year, then we'll have to revisit that the following 18 months for recommendations to give to the local. So.
Why would you not have the authority?
If the town doesn't vote to give us authority to distribute out of reserve accounts on the warrant this year. So Yeah. So townwide funding requirements, down 31.2%, assessment and fixed cost up 3.1, abatements and bad debt down 100%, other financial uses down 35, for a change of negative 3.2%. And so the total requirements for funding the town for the next 18 months is down 0.5%. So it's a decrease in total requirements on our municipal budget. Do we have any questions before we start going? Yeah.
I guess I have a question. If our total funding requirements is down 0.5%, why are our taxes going up?
Yeah, Mark and I had that conversation, right, and I had figured people were going to ask that. So, Mark, do you want to provide that answer for him?
Sure. So in general, well, a couple things. First, the CPI that Jerry had mentioned, if the general costs for goods and services in the broader economy are increasing by 3.5%, then it generally makes sense that the costs for consumers for governmental goods and services should also increase by 3.5%. But from a fund balance management perspective and a kind of a stability perspective, it's much better, and it's generally my recommendation to all my clients, that you keep the tax levy steadily increasing 3% to 5%, somewhere within that range, when you can afford to do so, or when basically the economy is in a generally good situation. What that does is it makes it predictable for townspeople, for taxpayers. It also helps to avoid sudden increases or decreases in your tax rate. So for example, sometimes, there are towns, regardless of my recommendations, that'll say, oh, well, we want to keep the tax flat, we want a 0% tax, or we actually want to reduce the tax compared to prior year. And then they do that for a couple of years because that's what they want to do, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, they either, the select board or the school committee is not able to do that, and all of a sudden, because of regular price increases in the general economy, and because of raises and all of that, all of a sudden they have to increase the tax, and the comparative tax increase is now 10% increase from the prior year because you've been keeping it flat for 1 or 2 years. So in general, my recommendation is just try to keep it steady when you can, particularly in even economic times. When it gets to economic times where you're in a recession or a depression, that's when you would want to start to say, okay, well, now we want to start cutting back in order to ease the tax burden on taxpayers. But we're able to do so because in the years that we've been going along, we've been kind of matching what the cost of goods and services are to the town, that is then turned around and passed on to the consumer, which is taxpayers.
Also, funding sources are down 3% too. So the cost of our budget is down 5.5%, but also our funds are down because of that 18-month period and some of those state revenue sharing and those state funded things like the tree growth and stuff like that. We're not getting those, so we just have less money too. So that's where we have to come up and make that difference.
So the 3.5% is just a randomly picked number based on that information?
Not randomly picked. It's picked based off of the general increase in inflation over the course of the last couple of years. So, for example, post-COVID, you had inflation rates that rose up to 8%, right? Well, in those weird economic times, the towns that hadn't been, basically keeping flat, the towns that had been keeping flat, now all of a sudden had to have a significant increase. I had one client that actually had to go through that, right? They hadn't maintained a steady increase, so then they had actually kept it flat for 2 years running. So basically 3 years of the same tax levy, and then all of a sudden, because inflation rates went through the roof. Now they were like, oh, well, we have to increase our tax levy by 19%. And people were all up in arms. Well, why do you have to increase it by 19%? Well, because we haven't been keeping pace, and now the cost to the town for its service, for its goods and services, right? You know, supplies, road repairs, paving, anything that has gone through the roof, well, that has to be necessarily passed on to the taxpayer. So it just makes better sense to say, okay, well, if in general the cost to the town to provide those goods and services is going up by about 3.5%, might as well turn around and pass that on to the taxpayers for an even keel type of economic, even keel economic assessment to them on a yearly basis. And again, it's also married in with, all right, well, where are we at with our fund balance, and where do we want to be with our fund balance? So, for example, right now, the select board, knows that the fund balance is too high because of those several years of not really paying attention to revenues, and the fund balance had increased to, going into this year, was 3.6 million. So then for FY24, the idea, and going forward, the idea is to slowly reduce that down. There's a temptation on a lot of towns, well, if our unassigned fund balance is way too high, why don't we just not increase the taxes at all and reduce it a lot faster? I can certainly understand that, but if you do that, you end up running into the same problem. Sometimes you're wrong in your estimates, and you end up reducing it faster than what you anticipated, and then you come up to another year where all of a sudden you're at this cliff, and you're like, oh, well, now we have to, now our fund balance is way too low, and so we have to increase our taxes just in order to pad our fund balance again. Because an unassigned fund balance is necessary. It's not like you can just run with a fund balance of 0 or 1%.
Yeah, because you got to manage cash flow a little bit there, and
Yeah.
and then at our current, we'll get to this later, but our current rate of fund balance expenditure, it's like 4.7 years or 4.5 years before it gets spent down to a point where we expect that we just need the amount 2 months of cash flow liquid. And so the other thing too is by maintaining some of that fund balance and not just saying, all right, this year 0 taxes because we're spending the whole fund balance down. We can keep some of that in that investment income, and so when we have periods where we're getting good interest rates, which again, we don't have the crystal ball, but it can help us with that too, so generate some revenue.
Yeah, I'm definitely not advocating 0 by any
yeah.
means,
Yeah.
but I guess the question in my brain that keeps coming up is, why not compromise between our Social Security residents and the CPI? Because I know it's regional versus national, but national CPI isn't 3.5%. So I guess I'm just curious if you guys even had the thought process of compromise.
Yeah, and that's something we think about, we take very seriously. Mean age in Durham's about 41, but we know that we do have a large population that is in the retirement community. We understand that they're on a fixed income. This is one bill that they can vote for, but don't necessarily can change. They can't, you can pay less and you can drive less, right? You can go out to eat less, and we know you can mitigate things there. It's just one of those things is that we understand that, but we also need to provide the same level of goods and services that the community has asked us to, and that's where that cost comes into play. And it's not the aggregate, but that CPI works out to be about 3.5%. So we think that that's a fair expectation to hand off to the taxpayers as a whole. So.
Okay, so you didn't take in their
Well,
raise.
we do think about it, but it's
Because you could use more of the fund balance.
Yeah, we could use more of the fund
To get that
balance.
0.5% and come up with a little bit more of a
Yeah.
compromise.
And so we could use more of the fund balance, but we have a schedule that we think we're comfortable with paying that fund balance down to fund future capital so that we don't have to borrow again in the future, also keeping more of that liquid and more of it invested right now. And so if there was some sort of catastrophic emergency in town and we had some very large expense pop up, right now we could offset that because we could go to the town at the next town meeting and try to offset that with that fund balance, whereas if we spent that down, if there's that catastrophic emergency, we're now either having to borrow or having that large increase. So we just think it's a responsible way to bring it down slowly. But if the budget committee wants to make a recommendation to use more of the fund balance, that's totally your prerogative, so. This is just our thought process on it, so. Oh, Heather, yeah?
Mark and Jerry, you can speak to this number more accurately, but if I remember correctly, when we were at our least amount of cash flow, where we needed to use the fund balance to get through the year, that, at the lowest point, we were at like 800,000. Is that,
Yeah,
am I
we did.
remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
And so, when we talk about that, right, that feels, I mean, I'm super conservative. I don't want to be in a situation where we're going down lower than that to be able to pay our bills.
We went from $3.5 million to 800,000 this past
1
year.
million. 1
Yeah,
million.
well, and part is because of the way
How
when
long
we're
was
collecting,
that?
we only collect taxes once a year. So when you have that one collection, you're spending your money down until you get that next collection. So
That's great.
we do a cash flow analysis. We're good there. But if we go too low, we might have the money, but we don't have the cash flow. And so we'd have to get like a tax anticipated note at that point. We're trying to avoid any sort of borrowing, so.
Yeah, just to give you an idea of the fluctuation in the cash flow, so, this, in FY '24, meaning last January 1st, we had 4.4 million going into January, and then that was slowly reduced, because the difference between inflows and outflows is about $500,000 a month. All the way down until June, then the cash balance or available cash balance was $1 million, and that's including the CDARS balance, right? What we had in savings. That was in June, and then once July hit, because the tax commitment went out at the end of June, once taxes hit, that's when July's balance
Yeah.
shot back up.
So perfect example, January through May, our cash inflows are roughly 340,000, 320,000. July, our cash inflows are 5.3 million. And so we just get that one payday
Right.
and we have to manage it throughout the year. So.
I think the easiest way for people to think about it in terms of like what they can relate to in their personal life is if you look at your escrow balance on your mortgage statement, right? When you're at your highest point, you're at your highest point. But then when your property tax bill gets paid or your homeowner's insurance gets paid, you're really close to the bottom of what's in that account. And this, in my brain, that's the easiest way for me to think about this, what that's relatable.
Yeah. And so we would potentially have cash flow issues if we just said, spend that fund balance down to 2 months of expenses. Well, once we get to that June timeline before we've collected taxes in a normal 12-month year, we might not have enough money, so we'd have to get into borrowing, getting a tax anticipation note, and we just really our select board wants to really avoid paying interest, so that's why we want to have that balance there. So.
Neil?
How are you controlling the fund balance?
What do you mean?
Just that, how are you controlling the degradation of it?
So, as you can see on the summary page, right? In FY '23, you can see the net was an addition to fund balance, right? And that was a result of FY '23's budget, not estimating revenues. For FY '24, the budget contemplated a $668,000 deficit, meaning the town was planning on eating into the budget by
Or
$668,000. I'm sorry, the fund balance by $668,000. Now, in reality, you're not really ever going to hit that exact budgeted use of fund balance because, again, we almost always are conservative on our estimates of revenue and are almost always estimating to use budget more than what we will actually expend, and we can't actually go over the budget expenditure. So yes, so when you say to me, as during budget season, when you say, all right, well, we're going to budget to use $668,000, I'm thinking, all right, well, you'll probably be around $300,000 to $500,000 of actual use, and that's exactly what happened in FY '24.
Yeah, if you flip to that front page, you'll see we had
Excuse me,
$668,000.
Because revenue was underestimated?
No, I mean, revenue was underestimated by only $100,000. I'm sorry, no, you're right. Revenue was underestimated by about $175,000 and expenditures came in under budget by about 100,000.
And for example, like we had not transferred money into the investment option when we did the budget last year. That was in process, so we didn't budget for that. When we got that good, good rate, we saw a 150% increase in our revenue right there. And so you'll see here on the additional use of fund balance, we had budgeted 668,000 in FY 2024. We only ended up using 428,000 of that. And so
So the idea is, again, not to dramatically decrease the fund balance right away. What it is to say, okay, well, we have, too high of a fund balance. We have unassigned fund balance of about 3.8 going into the year. If we eat into it or if we budget to eat into it by 668, realistically, we're gonna eat into it by about 500,000, which is what happened. And then what we wanna do is we wanna slow that rate that we're eating into it over the year so that you're kind of having a soft landing to come into where you want your fund balance to be. And that takes several years, right? And so then once you get to that point where your fund balance generally is where you want it to be, within a 15 to 25% range of what your expenditures are, that's the general rule of thumb, basically 2 to 3 months worth of expenditures. Then it's really just, you're not budgeting to use the fund balance most years, right? The only time you're budgeting to use a fund balance is when you're like, oh, well, we had more revenues than we really thought we were gonna have, and we had a lot less expenditures, and so our fund balance is starting to rise. So then we're gonna try to keep it, we'll increase our fund balance, our use of fund balance for the next year to bring it back down. But right now, the situation that the town is in is it has too high of a fund balance, right? As far as the select board is concerned, as far as taxpayers are concerned, and in general. And what we want to do is we want to slowly bring that back down to about the 15 to 25% range. And you generally want your unassigned fund balance to be on the higher end of that range during good economic times, so that when a recession hits, you have that cushion to allow it to go down to about the 15% range, hopefully by the time the recession ends, so that then by the time you can bring it back up to that 25% range.
So in summary,
Yeah.
An increase, the budget use of fund balance is affected by an increase in the budgeted revenue and a decrease in the budget.
In expenditures, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's
In the
correct.
future.
All of those three major factors on the summary page affect your targeted property tax. Or you could look at it the other way, your revenues and expenditures affect how much you're budgeting to use fund balance. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So in the past, we've used the fund balance to offset increases in the taxes, correct? So we're gonna come down to a plateau where that's not gonna be the case. So we need to be thoughtful that as we're raising the budget, that there's gonna be no buffer there to lower it. And
and
we're gonna eat that every single year, whatever the increases are.
And that's why you generally want to have this, why I suggest having a steady increase year to year of between 3 to 5%, so that when you get to that point, because people are thinking in their minds, oh, well, we're always gonna be able to use the fund balance to offset the tax increase so that we can keep it low. But if you have been managing it well, that 3 to 5% increase, which kind of marries up with what general inflation is, should be about what you're gonna need anyway in order to keep your town providing the services, the goods and services on a regular
But
basis.
normally, we've been increasing what those goods and services are.
That's correct.
And it's kind of been hidden, I don't wanna say hidden. To the taxpayer, it's been not as blatant because we've been able to offset it. Right.
Yeah.
So in future, that won't be there.
I think one important thing to remember is that we're trying to maintain our municipal services at a flat rate, but our biggest expense, the school, we don't control. And so the way I think about it is if our biggest expense for most households, that would be the mortgage, goes up 9% one year, that's the difficult to absorb in your personal budget. And if one of our next biggest expenses, county tax, goes up, and so we start this budget process off with your most expensive things going up 6% and your second most expensive things going up 9%, and then we have to try to mitigate that impact. And so if we just carried that percentage increase over, even with our flat budget, that's going to have impact at a higher percentage rate than we would want to see to the taxpayer. And so that's why we're using some of that fund balance. The other thing too is that we now have our capital improvement plan with our 10-year expenditures that we're starting to put money into, in the hopes that those big needs in the future don't get come up to us on surprise. So the way I think about it is you pay off a car and you start taking that car payment and you put in it towards your next car, right? And so that we're trying to mitigate that, and then also at the same time manage it so we don't have to take out tax anticipation notes and pay interest to pay our bills. So that's our tactic to try to address that concern.
Okay. I have another question, as you just led right into that. I didn't see any documentation here as to what we're spending on capital. I saw that we have what we're asking for, what we're transferring over, but there's no, like, what are we buying? Like,
Yeah, I think we're not there yet
okay.
in the budget. Yeah, that's where we're getting into all these really small lines. So.
All right. You're hoping I fall asleep before then.
John?
The cash flow analysis changes completely going forward, right?
Yeah, because we have two periods of collection.
You have 2 periods of collection, 2 lows maybe.
And
I didn't saw, I guess it's part of.
yeah, 2 periods of collection, depending, some people, when there's 2 periods of collection, just come in and pay their whole tax bill up front. Some people spread that out. It's different for people paying their taxes versus out of their pocket versus escrow accounts. And so that's something we're taking into consideration too. And part of the reason why having a healthy fund balance can help with cash flow management, particularly in this 18-month period with that change in cash flow.
Thank you.
Wicked smart. That was a good one, John. Good question.
Mark gave it to me.
I thought I saw him whispering.
Anybody else? Okay.
We're at the beginning of administration on page 10. I think we all bumped back to the front page, but page 10 is where we are now. All right, so the total changes here is 13.8% annualized. That's $538,833. You can see we've got some changes in department head wage of 3.9%. Department head wages, where full-time staff wages are up 56.2%, but you'll see part-time staff wages are down 100%, and that's reflective of the resignation that we had, and then moving 2 people from part-time to full-time, so we don't have any part-time staff anymore. You just see our basic expenses here, like our election worker wages, election office wages. There's some changes there. Payroll taxes are down 8%. Health insurance is up 186%. Health insurance is up 9%, and added family coverage. When you move, like I think you pointed out, when you move someone into full time versus part time, they have the opportunity to take benefits. So there's an added expense right there. Our worker compensation is down. Our retirement is up. Training and development is at 0%. Travel and mileage is down. We've got a 0% estimate on heat, electricity, telephone and internet is down 25.9%. Our legal, we're expecting a 50% increase, and that's because our suggestion is that we move to a monthly retainer model. Jerry, do you want to explain the difference between what we're doing right now and a monthly retainer?
Yeah, so the monthly retainer gives us the opportunity to talk with the town attorney as much as we want, when we want, and we just get billed monthly for that service. And we're using her a lot more these days. So prior to that, we would just budget, and I don't think we use our attorney much at all.
Yeah. And part of the reason why we're using the attorney more is that we've now adopted a policy where, like, if there's proposed ordinance changes, we want a legal mind looking at it, because there's a challenge of, like, what the town votes on and what the town gets presented and walks in might have legal implications that don't line up with state law. And so having a town attorney available for that, and also, in if there was a bad situation with any sort of legal needs, we would have the town attorney as well. And so we're just building a much more robust relationship with our town attorney than the town's had with previous council. so.
Is the 24 number accurate?
It is.
Actual, the actual?
Where are you?
Did you want to hear the whole budget first? or-
No, I got distracted by Neil's question. With regard to the monthly retainer, is that the only expenditure for the attorney, or is there any hourly billing above and beyond that?
Only if she has to go in and litigate, that doesn't
Yeah.
include any litigation, or if you have to go to court
Yeah.
or anything like that. That is just basically legal consulting.
Mhm. Good question, though. We're down with our auditor. Our business services are up 44%. Payroll processing services down 33%. Equipment rentals are down. Building repairs and management is flat. General insurance is up 6.3%, 6.7%. Advertising's down 33%. Printing and copying's up, and you'll see there we have two town. Well,
It says total
printing
annual.
toe annual reports that we a little bit of a. But we will now be printing 2 of our award-winning annual reports every year. We won an award last year for our annual report amongst the small municipalities.
Did
So,
you?
yeah,
Oh,
and,
nice.
and we do ours by with staff internally, not with external staff. So 2 award-winning annual reports in this budget.
Can you explain why 2? I'm missing something here.
Yeah, because we're gonna have the 2 town. We're gonna have the printing for this upcoming report, and then the one for the town meeting that's gonna be in June
Okay.
of the second weekend of June in 2026.
All right, thank you.
Under business services,
Can you give me the line number? Is that 27222?
yes, it is.
Okay,
Okay.
27222. Yep. What's the question?
I don't know.
There's quite an increase there, and is that what additional services, there are additional services there?
Mhm. Jared, can you
Yeah,
explain that?
so, one of the services is Mark, so he's flat for, and then the other 20,000 is for human resources
Mhm.
over the last next
Yeah.
18 months to help with.
I'm not picking on Mark, but Mark came in and did a great job in converting a lot of things that needed to be converted. To what extent do we continue that service versus educating the existing staff that we have so they can perform the service?
I won't make Mark answer that question.
No,
But,
doesn't need- no,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
need
So
to
we think
answer.
it's very important as a select board that our finances are done by a certified public accountant. And it's very standard for municipalities to utilize annually their accountant to do their services and their quarterly reporting. And so that's why we think it's important to continue that moving forward.
Can
So
I
in
add to
the
that?
past,
So, sorry.
in the past, we've had an audit service that would come in and check out all of our
Mm-hmm,
books a year at the end of the year.
mm-hmm.
So, is that continuing?
Yeah, it,
Independent?
yeah, we still have an independent audit, which is always gonna happen with municipal funds, yeah. And so I will say that our, findings in our audit, we've been, getting really good, responses and fixing outstanding issues that were existing before we were working with a certified public accountant. So that's a good thumbs up, kind of a
So when
report
we
card.
do we get to the point where his auditing services on a monthly basis are not needed, or and the existing staff can be educated to take that over or not?
I think in order,
Outside service.
what's that?
You'd want for an audit, you want
No, I'm
someone.
talking about Mark's.
Yeah,
To be honest, it's unlikely.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's unlikely is just because my experience has been you can't find people that know how to do governmental accounting,
yeah.
which is why I have a business.
And I would note that when staff was doing it before, you all had 2 million that you didn't know you had.
Yeah, and that was,
I don't know how well they were doing.
yeah. And so
I'd
in
say
order
not
for, in order for us to bring,
New.
in order for us.
Wait, hey, shh. One at a time, please.
In order for us to do it internal, we would have to create a position and hire an accountant, a certified public accountant with experience. with experience in municipal finances, which if we didn't have Mark, we would just be adding another employee to do that. And we just think it's a much wiser use of our funds to do that as a consulting value instead of a full-time benefited employee, which has additional costs.
So at one point, I know that town manager has suggested that he wanted to increase the amount of hours back in the office.
Mm-hmm.
What line is that?
The line we're talking
The
about.
line we're talking about right now.
Oh, it is.
We're finding
Yeah.
it out.
And so rather than having staff do human resource work right now, digging into their hours, because our staff are busy full-time right now, we would then have a HR consultant handle some of that work to free up staff time to work on things that we have valued as more important for them to address.
Is that HR consultant going to need office space?
No.
No.
No. We were really lucky to find a consulting. And for smaller municipalities, a lot of these things, it's better to explore the consulting option rather than the employee option, just because that expense and liability with having another employee. If we were a much larger municipality where this had a much larger workload, and that would be a different conversation. But fortunately, based off our size, if we had to have someone full-time for HR, the budget line would probably be quadrupled for that person compared to the service is that we're getting with
Can
the
the
consultant.
legal, can the attorney do the HR?
Wait, Alan's not finished.
Oh, you
So
finished?
how
Oh,
are
sorry.
we-
Oh, I didn't hear him.
We'd also talked about, it had been discussed about when some of your full-time employees need to have some time off, let's say they're going on vacation.
Mhm.
How is that being handled?
Well, because of a lot of moving parts with this 18-month budget, we're saying we're just keeping it steady the way it is right now rather than having an increase there. And so right now, if someone is going on vacation or out, that the other staff do have to continue to pick that up. So,
And there may be wait times.
yeah. And so without increasing a full-time staff person, that's how we have to manage it. And we just didn't, after we recommended this HR person, Jerry came back and said his recommendation was just that consultant, because we don't want to have a lot of new added to an 18-month budget, because there's already a lot of questions,
Thank you.
Donna.
Can the lawyer do the HR?
No,
I mean, retainer? Can the payroll company do HR?
No.
I know the payroll company I had does HR.
yeah, not ours, no.
No?
And or if they did, we'd have to do an added expense because it'd be a new service. It's not built into the existing contracts. So we can't do it without increasing the
How much
expense there.
exactly is the HR, please?
$20,000
Yeah.
for the 18-month period.
And she may not use it all.
Yeah.
It's just a budget
$20,000 a year, you said.
number. 18
For the
months.
18-month period. And
So
so,
that's 65,000, 45,000 is budgeted for me, and 20,000 is budgeted for the HR person over that 18-month period.
Why do we need them? We've never needed them before. Now all of a sudden we
yeah,
gotta increase
we're
that.
exposed to a lot of liability without an HR professional, and we've just got lucky that there hasn't been any major issue. So, for example, our town manager has started to develop job descriptions for each position behind there, the glass. Those didn't exist. It was just one that was developed before. Starting to develop things like wage tables that extrapolate what increases could look like over several years. There's ADA compliance things with our job descriptions that haven't been met in the past, and then things with like onboarding and if there's any issue that arises. And so the select board is not comfortable with the level of risk that it exposes the municipality to right now, and we've just been lucky in the past, so we want to bring in a HR person to cover that. And so we felt like this is a really good approach to it.
Yeah.
How is our accounting handled now? What's the process? I know the payroll's done by Board Savings, I guess, but.
So, so the accounting is done, the data entry is done at the town office. So and the daily receipts are done at the town office. AP is input into the Trio services. Then my services, which are essentially outsourced comptroller services. I come in on a quarterly basis and I'll review all of the books, all of the data entries, post all of the necessary adjustments, because there's always errors or there's just things that need to be reclassified. I'll generate quarterly reports for the select board, such as that cash flow statement, the quarterly financial statements. And then at the end of the year, I close the books like I did this year, and I help with the preparing the budget. I help with the auditor, getting the auditor all the information that the auditor needs. So that's how overall the accounting is done. The data entry, like I said, is all done here, but it's just data entry.
Like staff are billing things to certain accounts and stuff like that, so.
Who does payables?
The staff, right.
From Trio?
Yeah, right. As what they do is they put it into Trio, they code it into Trio, and then they go ahead and cut the checks on a regular basis. Yeah.
I may have missed it. At one point in time, we were gonna buy into a different non-Trio thing. Did we pass over on that?
We're not at that line yet, but yes.
Okay. I'll wait.
Neil, you
The first 9 pages went quicker than the 10th page, so.
Can I add something about the contracted services? We have been in a situation multiple times where when an employee that does a specific function leaves, they leave with the institutional knowledge that they hold for that position. And so by contracting especially the financial piece, it doesn't leave, the institutional knowledge of it doesn't leave with the employee. In terms of HR, and then on top of all of that, there's the savings associated with not having to pay benefits, not having to pay vacation time, not having to pay sick time, not having to pay to train, and getting people who they have this specific specialty that we need for that specific job. And we only have to access that level of service that comes at a premium price to be able to hire someone to be a town employee that has that level of service or level of specialty that we need for that. So when I'm thinking about it, I feel like it's the biggest bang for the buck, because we're getting that high level of specialty service that we need for that function, but we're not having to pay all of the associated costs with having a full-time employee or a part-time employee to do that function.
And then
So-
frankly, we run into space, like, if we added more employees for this, not only do we have that increased cost like Heather's talking about, we just now need to find a space for them. And so if we had a full-time HR and a full-time finance director, it'd be pretty crowded in the town office. So, did you have something else to add, Heather?
I just wanted to say, I do recognize Alan's point that it doesn't help coverage if people are out to go this route, but to me, in terms of cost effectiveness, I think, you know, you have to weigh the pros and the cons, and to me, the cost benefit associated with doing the consulting piece of it versus hiring a full-time employee just makes more sense for our town.
Yep. I don't think anybody's ready for me, but I'm ready. I'm gonna make a statement that I don't really want to address tonight, but I think everybody's been dancing around an elephant. And I just want to point this elephant out because I think at town meeting, it's really going to be brought into the circus. 3-4 years ago, the town was presented that if we hire a town manager, they will have the financial knowledge, they will have the HR, they'll bring in grant money. So on the surface of things, it looks like one might say we hired a town manager that couldn't do the job, so now we're having to subcontract out. And I've had other people say to me, why do we still need a town manager if we're subcontracting everything out?
Yeah.
Don't want you to address it tonight,
Well, no,
because I need to get to the rest of this budget and get to bed. But I just want you guys to prepare yourself that that question probably will come up a little bit more rudely than the way it's been presented tonight.
And I would like to address that with, just briefly, we did an analysis of our surrounding, I've taken time to do an analysis of our surrounding communities with town managers, and the vast majority of them have more than one person. So when you look at their responsibilities on the MMA sheets that we have access to as elected officials to see the salaries and what their jobs and roles are, generally speaking, in the surrounding communities, the town manager has one job, and that's town manager, as opposed to town manager, director of finance, HR director and all those things. There's just only 2,080 work hours in a year, and that's just a lot to have one person do. And so when we look at how other municipalities handle it, they either handle that through peeling off their financing and their HR and using consultants, or having a specific person assigned to that. When I look at nearby communities with same population size as us, they have executive secretaries for their town manager, or they have assistant town managers, or they have those dedicated staff. And so I didn't make the presentation 4 years ago as to what the expectations for a town manager was, so I can't speak for who made that there. But our town manager is fully meeting the select board's expectations, and I think highlighting the need for some of these specialized things that we can fill with contract roles versus other staff just deals with the limited hours there are in a work year. And so that's all I would say about that, you know.
All right, so we left off at business services. You want to continue from there?
Yep. Business services. Go around to payroll.
It's other people asking the question, not me. I just wanted to give them a heads up.
Yeah, no, I think that's
Go ahead, take it.
perfect question. Yep. Payroll processing services were down 33%. Equipment rentals are down. Building repairs and maintenance is flat over the 18-month period. General insurance is up 6.5%. We're estimating a 5% increase for 2025, and then again in 2026, but that's only paying half of that in that 2026 timeframe. Advertising is down. Like I said, the award-winning printing of the town report is up because we have to do 2. Postage and freight is up. Just that's cost of doing postage and freight's up. Dues and subscriptions 1.1%, and that's just based off of 18 months for dues and subscriptions. And software licensing, we pulled that line and put it in elsewhere. General supplies are down 28%. Lien cost is up 33%. Election cost is down 9.1%, and miscellaneous expenditures is up 157%. And that's for a main PERS payment for the retirement system for a employee who resigned. So that's a one-time cost there.
That might have been prevented had you had an HR person.
Yeah, and that's the issue. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not necessarily defending or otherwise, but.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's one of the challenges when you work for a municipality, you have to enter into the main pension system, and prior to when someone filled out their paperwork, that was not done correctly, so they weren't paying into to main PERS when they should have been. So.
That's not entirely true.
Oh, sorry.
Specifically for Durham, you have to enter.
Yeah, Durham, you have
Not
to.
all not all municipalities.
municipalities.
Depends on what your agreement is with the Social Security Administration, which was
So in
enacted
Durham, you have to
50
enter
years
into it.
ago, and whether or not you signed up to it. These are the types of to be honest, these are the types of very complicated questions that an HR person would know about that almost nobody knows about.
I'd like to remind you of my request to be recognized before.
My apologies.
questions. Donna?
On the dues and subscriptions there, you get GP cog in there. How much is that? Because I got told that was not costing us a penny. We
It
get a
costs us
grant back.
$8,000, and we usually get this year we got $23,000 in return on that in terms of the grants that we were awarded and money that we saved negotiating with them for it's salt and for fuel. Sorry, so it's an $8,000 dues, but we get a very good return on investment there.
What are we getting back on that? I'm sorry.
So it's an $8,000. This line just shows you the dues for that, and we are getting so far as of February 4th, $23,000 in grants through GPCOG that are only available if you are working through GPCOG. So
Good job.
And what is that gonna cost the town? I mean, like, if we're getting 23,000 in grants, what are they
Costing you
expecting?
$8,000.
we're not paying any money for those
What are
grants.
they expecting us to do for it?
So that's like, for example, our downtown envisioning program is paid for entirely through a grant from GPCOG. So that's not an expense that we're getting. And then it's just there's no town match for those grants that we're getting.
So if we decide to do nothing with GPCOG, if the town votes it out, do we still get this 23,000?
Nope. In order to access the GPCOG grants, you have to pay the dues for GPCOG. And so our goal as a select board is to maximize the amount of grant opportunities that don't cost additional municipal dollars into our community. I just speak for myself. The way I think about it is a grant is a tax that was taken from you somewhere, whether it's in your sales tax, your private property tax, your municipal tax, federal or state. And so as the select board looks at it, we want to find as many of those grant opportunities and bring as many of your dollars back into Durham. And GPCOG is a really good return on investment there.
So they're costing us 8,000. If we do nothing with them at all, we lose everything and we spend out 8,000.
And we would,
Have I got that right?
if we did nothing with them?
Yes, that's all I
Not
wanna know.
necessarily, because they help us get a negotiated fuel cost by working as a group to negotiate within GPCOG. So.
Salt bids too.
And salt as well. So it's how we work together with local communities to get a benefit for the large orders that you can group together when you get multiple communities together, and you get that economy of scale benefit.
Okay, so it costs us 8,000 for them to help us get lower prices in salt.
Yeah,
and
because the
fuel.
way if you think of
Exactly.
the way if
Okay.
you think about it, it's like if you and your neighbors
That's
all
a
get
lot of
together and you
salt,
share
yeah.
on the shipping costs and you buy the Costco membership or whatever, and you buy all your stuff in bulk. So
Okay, thank you.
it's been a really good return on investment for our community. Our select board is hoping to continue to make sure we're getting the most out of that. So
Phyllis?
Going back up to the training and development,
can you give me the line number? Sorry.
it's 7105, 207105.
Yep.
What is that training? Is it just for, what is that training?
Yeah, Jared, do you want to cover the training?
Yeah, it's training for the employees.
Yeah.
To
For
do
the systems or,
everything, what you need to do to Title 38 for the clerks, for, Mark does a class preparing for the audit, so we'll send our employees to that. I go to trainings, it's trainings for the employees.
So trainings on how to utilize the programs that we have, how to work within the municipal setting and things like that.
If you folks in this group go to some training, we'll pay for that, it comes out of that.
Yeah, boards and committees, if they, like, for example, if they want to get a training on municipal budgeting or something like that, that's something that comes out of here.
Right.
okay. Thank you.
Good question.
Yep,
And as you can see, that's something that we just 1.5 times the 1 year
yep,
value. So.
yep.
So I think we did make it to total administration, which is up 13.8%. And do we have any more questions on that section?
What line was 20-7356 software licenses? What was that moved to?
7.
It was moved down to 267356.
No, the software license 237356. You said.
Yeah. Page
Well,
11.
it's kind of split
It
up.
moved to IT, the IT
Yeah.
line section,
Page 11.
yeah.
Yeah. Move to the next page. Are we good to move to the next page, or do we want to have any more questions here?
Maybe. Move on.
Okay, so now we're in the information technology section. We're seeing a 126% increase in IT services. We've moved into those new IT services. We were we're seeing that expected cost at $2,803 per month. This is one of the lines that had a slight adjustment to what was sent out in the previous budget. The previous line was budgeted at $49,400 and it's now budgeted at $51,000. The website, up 124%. We also now are using MyTextGov, which is $8,000, and our website is $2,100. Software licenses. So this is a line here where we're moving over to Town Cloud, which is a new service provider who's building out the software right now. They're based out of Brunswick. And so when we move over to them, it will be about $15,000 a year cheaper. And so we've
15,000 period.
So we're locked in at $15,000 as opposed to $25,231, and we were able to lock in for how many years at that? 10 years at that price. So it's a new service offered locally that is being utilized by some other municipalities as well, and they really, price to steal to break into the market, and we're comfortable with the questions that they were able to answer and with their background and their experience. And it's also local, they're right in Brunswick, and so that's nice to be able to utilize them. We did budget that for a little bit of overlap for Trio and Town Cloud to exist at the same time, because Town Cloud is being built out right now. We anticipate it being online in July, but we budgeted for Trio to extend an overlap a little bit there. So, yeah. Well, sorry, I can't call anybody.
So we're not under contract with, Trio? It's a month-by-month payment?
We actually were paying one annual payment. But now we're paying buy-in twice a year now, because I don't know exactly when this is gonna come out, so if Town Cloud comes out and it works, I'll cut off the payment to Trio.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so we have that ability with Trio. And we also worked with our assessor to make sure that they can work within new programs as well, so.
And I did it 6 months too, so, we're on that, July 1st to June 2.
Yep.
Because it's just
Okay.
easier. It's very, I wouldn't say it's difficult, it's very time-consuming to do this budget, the way it's set up now, especially on 18th month, because you wanna know what's getting paid January to July, and what gets paid from July to December, because it makes a difference.
And the town software, like when you're at municipal events and you talk about Trio, people are kind of like, oh boy, yeah, that's the challenges we're having. So we're hoping that not only will this save money by having that contract locked in, but it will increase efficiency in the office. And sometimes when we're looking at municipal budgets, we only look at the dollar amount, but that human timeline that lost. That opportunity cost can be huge. So if we can cut down the time people are spending on this sort of stuff, that opens up them to do other things that we can hope will increase revenues or find other opportunities there, so.
Donna?
Do you know how many people are into the MyTex Gov? How many?
960.
Yeah,
960?
yeah. And we're hoping to help promote that a little bit more at the town meeting as well. About 2,000 households in Durham, 960. We're operating on the assumption that some households may only have one person using it. And then there's always going to be an element of people who aren't going to use it because they might not utilize text services on their phone or just might choose not to utilize it. But we're finding it to be a really helpful tool for outreach, and we're just trying to make sure we increase transparency, increase communication, and this has been a really helpful way that we can do that, especially if there's emergency situations and stuff like that. And one thing we're hearing, when people's power goes down, hopping online isn't always possible. For some reason, I have terrible service at my house. If I don't have my Wi-Fi, I can't really reliably get onto the internet super well if I have to receive notifications through town services that way. So having a text message has worked for folks like that. So.
Thank you.
Yes, Mark.
Question regarding Trio and Town Cloud. I guess it's really two questions regarding Town Cloud. First is, are they going to be able to migrate historical data from Trio?
Yeah.
And the second is there going to be an additional cost to that, or is that built into their
No, that's all
contract?
built into this. Yeah.
Perfect.
We asked that question too. So. All right. So general supplies, hardware is at 0%. So we're seeing total IT as a 54% increase, and that's 72,000 annualized. And that is because we are using more expensive IT services, and we have a little bit of overlap for Trio and Town Cloud. And so that's where we get that increase there. Could we take like a 1-minute recess so I can use the restroom? Okay, thank you.
It's not allowed. Did we do assessing or did I miss it? I thought maybe.
Oh, I think we missed it.
I thought maybe I was napping.
You can think about using the restroom.
His head was in the
I think he said, do you have any questions about assessing? But I don't think he mentioned it.
I don't know yet. We just talked about it.
Okay.
Did we, I can't remember now. Are we moving to discussion on this? Or
I think we should see what time we're done tonight.
sleep on it?
Finish this up and
I'm not staying later than
think about it for a
9:30.
week and.
I'll be snoozing. I'll
Come
be
back with
snoozing right
questions
here.
and then to our motion. Yeah.
We're kind of asking questions as we go
I'm sorry?
along.
I don't want these guys.
They're welcome to come, but we don't have to,
No, you're
we don't
not.
have to include them in our conversation.
For what?
We don't have to include them in our discussion.
But it'd be nice to get the questions answered today.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yep, just get the questions answered.
We might think of more questions, but
Jonathan,
get the basic.
annual report, please.
we didn't go to like commercial break, right?
No.
No,
Okay.
there's still a
So, Jerry, can I ask you a question about FOA while we're taking a break then? My understanding is, when reading over the frequently asked questions, we needed to have a point person. And Joe thought that was you. Is that you?
You can send it to me, I may just hand it off to one of the clerks, it depends on what it is and where the information's coming from.
Okay. Well, according to the question and answer, we're supposed to officially have a person assigned to FOA.
Okay, you can use me, that's fine.
Okay. And what media sources are we using when we're announcing public meetings and town meetings?
I'd have to ask Jess what they've been using, they take care of that.
Okay, all
It
right.
depends on the meeting too. There are some
Maybe
requirements.
Forecaster, 'cause
There's-
that's cheap and local.
Yeah, some meetings require like print resources like Sun Journal and stuff like that. Others require it to be presented in 2 public places, and I think in the past we've done the town office and then Get and Go, are one store that people frequent, right? So,
Okay, all right. I was just asking before I was able to sign my form.
and if you sign up for my text, you'll get it there too. So everyone sign up for my text.
Joe, I don't think we heard a review on assessing.
Bottom of page 10.
Oh, page up. Yep, so mapping's down 33%. Most of this is down 33%. I'm guessing that's because we only are paying for it once in that 18-month period. So, and a total decrease of 4.4% there. Are we good to move to page 11? And thank you for the brief recess there. Needed it.
We already did that.
We already did page 11 here?
We
Yep,
did-
so IT, yep, planning and code enforcement. Full-time staff wages up 3.4%, part-time staff wages 8.5%. Committee member wages are down 40%, payroll taxes up 27%. Workers' comp was $2,430 in the budget, and then health insurance is down 51%. Retirement is up 2.1%, and travel mileage is flat funded at 0%. Advertising is down 6.7%. Postage and freight is down 1/3. Dues and subscriptions are down 10%. 0% changes on general supplies and miscellaneous expenditures, for a total change in total code enforcement at 3.8%. Do we have any questions? Oh, hands. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Why is part-time wages up 8.5?
Jerry, can you cover that?
That was because his increase last year wasn't budgeted for. So it's budgeted for now and this year.
The planning board, okay.
No, the part-time planner.
Planner, the
planner,
planner, sorry. Not the board, but the
Yeah.
planner.
Yeah.
The actual number's the same, though.
4390. Well, yeah, but then we have
Maybe he didn't work all his hours or
Yeah.
something, you know?
so total general government there is a 14.1% increase, annualized at $762,040. So, do we have any questions on page 11 before we move to page 12? All right, so fire department heads' wages are up 3.5%. Part-time staffs are 16.7%. This includes night coverage and more than a 10% increase in call volume, and then an increase in minimum wage. Those minimum wage workers were just the increase that's built into minimum wage. Payroll taxes are up 32%. Health insurance is flat. Workers' comp's up 29%. Retirement is up 2%. We have a stipend increase of 111%. Training and development is down 4.8%. Heat's down 16.7%. Electricity is down 11.1%. Telephone and internet is up 52.5%. That's because, if you all recall, we now have computer-aided dispatch, so we have needs for data plans in the vehicles. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes.
On the tablets. Dispatch services are down 30%. Ambulance services up 50%. And a lot of that's inflation for stocking the ambulance and the call volume. The medical supplies cost more. I'm sure Jill experiences that too. Equipment and repair maintenance up 16.7%. It's just the cost to repair our old equipment. Buildings and repairs is at 0%. Vehicle repair and maintenance is at a flat fund. Dues and subscriptions flat. General supplies flat. Radio is up 11%. And that's just the cost. The inflation rate on those radios is getting up there. And safety equipment is up 11%. We're down a little bit in diesel. Miscellaneous expenditures are flat percent for a 13.4% change in total fire department budget, which is annualized at $684,613. Questions in the fire department section?
I know I'm on the wrong line, but what are we buying?
What do you mean?
Patience,
Is it
dear,
done?
patience. Patience.
Just in general with the fire department? Like what's the fire
Why is it
department
up?
buy?
I mean,
Capital expenditures.
Capital.
We'll get there.
Oh, we'll get there.
God, you're killing me.
Jay, the answer to that is we're not buying anything.
Yeah.
We're putting money away for 4 more years.
Yeah.
Neil,
I guess I didn't hear this. Can you explain the night coverage note on 720?
I can, yeah.
We have night coverage now, right?
We budgeted for 9 months of night coverage, so in April, the townspeople voted unanimously to go with a night coverage. So I had in the budget 9 months, so I have to add 3 more months, and then, of course, 18-month budget. So night coverage is an extra $23,760 for the 3 months. So that's 90 days, which is 3 months, 12 hours a night, $22 an average hour. It was 23,000. So that's a majority of the increase for night coverage. And again, as the chair mentioned, Joe, minimum wage went up 50 cents an hour, so half the department is based on minimum wage. Every hour they work, every call, every training is up, and we don't know what that'll be in '26. So last year it was almost, I think, only 35 cents. This year it's 50, but it's not established. Maine State has not established for '26 what that is, so I have to at least budget something in there for 6 months of payroll increase. That could be anything. Our increased call volume being up 12%, again, I don't know what it'll be. That was just last year, so that equates to thousands of dollars and things that I don't control. So Mark can talk about payroll tax, workers' comp. When you increase your payroll, all that goes up too. I have no control over any of those line items. And then other line items that you won't see, we'll have to pay for like hose. So that's under equipment maintenance, that's up $1,000, it's 20%. I'm gonna have to pay for that twice. You saw the ambulance.
Yeah, I'm still on part-time staff wages there.
Okay, what,
458.
okay,
So that's annualized at $305,000, up from $232,000 actual.
yeah, part-time is also the part-time captain for 18 months, the
Yeah.
secretary. Call volume, all of it.
No, I'm thinking about the increase. The increase is about over $70,000. 23 of that I get is the nighttime thing. So there's another 50 and what? Your raise and?
No.
That's,
I'm not in that line
oh, I'm
item.
sorry, that's right, you're above that.
Minimum wage people got a 2.5% increase in their wage. That's what 50 cents equates to, if that helps.
Yeah, there's $50,000 there, I get part of that is the part-time wages increase, but.
Well, that's over 18 months though, what you're looking at.
No, I'm talking about
He's
annualized.
annualizing it.
Annualized, that's 300, the annualized 232 is 305.
He's annualizing the actual.
Yeah. Yeah, but that doesn't include, that's only 9 months of night coverage.
Okay, so I'm adding that back in, the 23 that you said.
Okay.
Still gives you 50 grand. I don't know, it sounds like a lot to me.
Well, if the crystal ball is how much we're gonna be up in the next 18 months of calls, so hundreds of dollars per call, and that equates to fuel and maintenance and everything else, but how many people come out? We now have 42 on the roster for night coverage. You're getting paramedics at night, they're the highest, dollar value, so.
So can you clarify that depending on who picks up the night coverage, it depends on the cost?
It does, yep.
So
A
A
sim-
EMT versus advanced EMT versus paramedic.
Correct. So we have to average that. A basic EMT could be 17, a paramedic could be 21, if they have firefighter certification, could be 23, if they're an officer. So every employee is almost paid different. It's
Again,
not-
I'm just asking, 50 grand sounds like a lot for one, that's all.
Specifically, the wage amount was calculated by taking $21.85, multiplying it by an estimate of about 14,000 hours, man-hours, over the course of 1 year. And then that would be annual, and then that would be
Multiplied by 1.5.
multiplied by 1.5. So the 2185 times 14,000 hours arrives at $305,900, and then you multiply that by 1.5. So that's where the part-time rate came in. It's basically it's basically being driven by the estimate of man-hours, which in this case is about 14,000.
Donna?
Is the 12% increase in call volume, is that all from mutual aid? I mean,
No,
that's,
that's a flat. Those numbers are flat, Donna. Mutual aid, you gotta get it out of your vocabulary. It's flat. As a matter of fact,
well, how much was just done for Durham then? How many calls for Durham? Do you have that
those are
number?
calls for Durham, Donna. They're flat.
Okay,
No, I'll give you the exact numbers, they're right in front of me, for fear that would be asked. Mutual aid given, ambulance, mutual aid given, we gave 39. That's a paramedic intercept or a transport. We gave 39. EMS mutual aid received, we took in 35.
Can you clarify that 39, we're still billing on those mutual aid calls?
Yep, that's flat. So we received 35. I called for 35 mutual ambulances, multiple car wrecks, multiple calls, maintenance of our ambulance, being at the hospital. We called and received 35 ambulances. We gave 39.
I was looking at the fire. Is
Okay.
this all for,
Nope, that's ambulance.
Okay.
So fire, we received 22 and we gave 35. That's also station coverage. We went to the scene 25 times, we did station coverage 10.
I think it's
And those numbers are consistent year over year. They're not out of whack. Those are in the 30s year over year.
I think it's important to think about mutual aid too as investment in our needs in the future. So there's a house that's standing right now because there was a chimney fire this week, and our ladder truck is being refurbished, and we had mutual aid from Lisbon who showed up with the ladder truck, and that's a really important thing that we have that relationship with. And I think that the town's developed really good relationships even with some of the full-time departments, so you're getting some really high quality support when we're getting those mutual aids. So it's a give and take in a rural community where I think we're breaking even in the aggregate. And if you ask someone whose house is saved, like last year when we had, how many people responded to the Meadowbrook fire?
I think 12, 14 towns.
14 towns responded, and there's a house that's standing there where the burn line was 4 feet away where that barn wasn't connected. I think that's a justification for mutual aid right there, saving someone's house. So.
No, Phyllis does.
Phyllis?
Can you speak to the stipends, what that is?
I can speak to
Whomever,
that.
yeah.
Certainly the first two, I'll give you the other ones. The first two are built in, they haven't gone up since I've been here. There's a deputy of EMS gets a stipend quarterly for being the deputy of EMS here. And there's an assistant chief stipend. So it doesn't matter the person, because that could change, quarterly. So those have not gone up. I think it said that's $4,600 a year. And that's not even split. I think one's like $1,750, one's $2,250. But those are stipends for the position. And again, those have not gone up in the 4 years I've been here.
Why stipend and not pay? Why don't they
That
just
was
pay?
one of my son in yeah.
Honestly, I think the town gets a better,
Yeah, there's
No, it's all paid.
well, it depends on how many hours they put in, right?
Oh, yeah.
And both are very active. That's the way it was set up when I was here, and it seems to work. It has not gone up. That's just for their role and their position. It's actually so I can call at them 24/7 to either respond or handle a situation or cover me on vacation and sick.
think of that as like almost like a retainer for that service, you know. It's really hard with the fire service to predict when the call's gonna happen or what the call's gonna happen, and if chief wants to go on vacation or go out of town for the night, he has to have someone who has the skill set to cover it, if there's a major incident, so.
Okay, thank you.
It also sounds like it's easily exchangeable.
Yes, and we
So-
control it, so quarterly stipend, right? If they don't show up, if they quit, then they don't get paid. And I have to sign off on that, and there's a redundancy, and then payroll at the town hall signs off, and then the town manager signs off for that stipend on that quarter.
Okay.
So it's almost just like having a salary position, but it's called a stipend instead, so. Helps keep that estimate flat, it's not variable by hours and call volume.
And I just wanted to clarify one thing that Chief said, because I think I heard right, but I want to make sure. What you were saying is, it's not our overall call volume that has gone up 12%. It is just our responses to Durham that
No,
has
it's-
gone
it's-
up 12%, and our mutual aid has stayed flat over the years.
It does appear mutual aid has stayed flat. The 12% is overall. Overall calls, those are 911 calls, right? Whether Auburn requests us, somebody else, or a citizen. So, and these are not doctored. Other departments will go out for training, they'll do an inspection, that type of stuff. These are 911 calls. They are up 12%. They went from 405 to 455, and they continue to climb. And honestly, some of those calls, bad on me, I don't even put them in. People call me to check their house, check a detector. Can you just, check a gas leak for me?
Kitten stuck in the tree.
Yep, I don't even create a call, so we're actually lacking calls. It is 12% for what we're called upon. That could be mutual aid, but overall call volume is up 12% year over year.
Right, but if you're dissecting it down and mutual aid hasn't changed from year to year.
Correct.
It can be then stated,
Our,
it's in-town call volume that's gone
It
up
does appear that
12%.
it's in-town call volume. Car wrecks were up 25%. We did 52 the year before, we did 65 last year. Those are the ones that we were called to. That's not just all of them, because sheriff will go to the non-injury accidents. So those are the ones that we were called to, and that's both ambulance and the fire side of things. Bless you.
Bless you.
Mutual aid does seem to be flat on those. The year before, we were doing 70% medical. Last year, we did 75% medical. Out of totality of calls, 75 were medical related.
Okay.
Which equates to billing, and that's why billing's up to 117,000. It's never been up that high.
You all set? Anybody else?
Oh, I doubt it.
Neil, did you answer your
Keep it
second
warm, keep it
question?
warm.
He answered the second part, not the first part. Would you have questions?
Any other questions on this fire department section?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Phyllis.
Safety equipment, the unfunded mandated, what is that?
Sure.
Chief's coming back.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, you can, well,
No, I
unless he wants to go
can do
ahead.
it from here.
Yeah.
OSHA is coming, well, we had an inspection this year from BLS, if you will. So every piece of equipment, from a fire helmet to your boot to everything, had to go through. The unfunded mandate is fire helmets have to be replaced in 10 years, regardless of the activity that it sees. So Boston could see more fire than us. I doubt it because of all the mutual aid, but we had to replace $4,000 just in fire helmets. They're $400 a piece. That's the cheapest one. That's not a leather helmet. You can go up to $2,000. I had to replace 10 helmets this year because they were out of date. So the mandated, unfunded, the state's not giving us funding for it, is that. OSHA also said eventually you may have to have 2 sets of gear. All our firefighters only have 1, and those have gone up to roughly $4,000 a set. And we have about 22 firefighters, so we're staggering them so that we don't just try to replace them all in 1 year. But I had to replace, I was over by, 100-something% on the safety, because I had to replace 4 to 6 sets of gear. So again, mandated to do so, funded through federal.
How often does OSHA come around to say, check all your equipment.
Well, to.
You say now you
to-
need something else.
You're not playing that game.
They will if there's an injury.
Oh,
Um, OSHA will come. Otherwise, we've invited them every 4 years for an all-inclusive, and that goes on Captain Dimick and again, all the firefighters for doing their due diligence. That was a 4.5-hour inspection of every piece of paper, of every employee, of every certificate. And again, on the captain for doing the due diligence over the years. And we passed, and we shouldn't see them unless there's an injury or a complaint.
okay. All right, thank you.
Joe?
I have two questions. Sugar, I already forgot one. All right, I'll ask the one I do remember. Where in this paperwork is grants that we received? I'm asking Mark, sorry.
Oh.
I apologize. You two both
You
went in
mean-
my line of
You
sight.
mean this current fiscal year?
For 2024, where are the grant
Yeah,
lines?
if you look in the fund balance on that last page where it shows all the fund balance.
The very last page,
Yeah,
page
everyone wants to
18.
get to the fund balance. In the grant matching reserve, you can see there was $22,000 that was received in grants. The town transferred in $2,200, and there was expenditures of almost $25,000.
Okay, but I'm assuming the fire chief hasn't lost his grant magic. And the select chair stated that just from CB cog, we got, or
GP.
thank you,
We know what you mean.
that we got 23,000. So did we miss reporting funds?
So,
No, that money was for the union, I mean, for the vision thing. It didn't go, it was a free service.
It's a grant. It still should have been recorded under grant matching.
It's a free service.
It wasn't a matching grant.
no.
Okay, so where are all of our grant money recorded, not just the ones that need to be matched?
So grants are recorded as we get grants in. If there's no cash flow that comes in, and it's just, I don't even know what the revision is.
Yeah, so for example,
Looking
like
for a
if there's a service like the downtown visioning work that's going on right now, that's an expenditure, but we don't end up seeing that cash flow because the grant funds are directed to the service provider rather than making them pass to us and then go to the service provider. So we access that via the service provider. It's kind of like if you buy a car and you sign off on the the discount, they carry that cost for you.
Okay, so can we have a grant report, please, in the annual fabulous, super cabulistic
The
book?
award-winning.
Yes, the
town
award-winning.
annual report? Yeah, I
Yes,
think
can
that's a
we
good-
have a grant page, since it's not properly reflected in the budget?
Do you remember the next question?
No, I'll circle back to it if I ever do.
Neil?
So,
And then
I thought I remembered from whether your last meeting or not, the chief was gonna get a stipend. I don't, is that in there? I didn't
Yeah,
see it.
it's under the 37,100 line, 5,200 per year for EMS and emergency medical service and emergency medical director. That's built in there. And so
Where does it say that? I don't see.
30-7,100.
5,200 a year for EMS and EMD, what does that mean?
That's the stipend for
That's
chief.
just the chief?
That's the stipend for whomever is filling the role of those two positions. So, it would,
What is EMS?
emergency medical service? Is that the correct way to say it? Emergency medical service?
EMS,
Honestly, Neil, both of those in EMD, Emergency Management Director, that is a contractual discussion I've had with the town manager and the select board, and not willing to have it with the budget committee. It's outside, I think, your purview of benefits and wages. It really goes to how many more hours the fire chief in this town works, runs calls, takes a call in the back of the ambulance, goes on the holidays and does CPR, all of it, and then brings in those revenues when they do transport.
Yeah, and so.
That's a contractual.
Yeah, so the town has determined that they want to establish a stipend for EMS and emergency medical director. And that's reflected in that line, and so.
Why not include that in wages?
Because if the layout of town employees were to ever change in the future, that's something that could be transferred to somebody else. Not that we have any plans for that, but if you look at other municipalities, that role is held by people who hold a variety of different jobs. There's even some examples in real small municipalities where a town manager who has that sort of background has that first response background has held that role. And there might be towns where there's a separate position dedicated to that role, or even someone in the municipal police force holds that role. And so the town felt, the select board felt that it was more appropriate to establish a stipend for that, because who fills that role could change, you know. And so it could be an assistant chief, it could be a captain at some point. So we just felt like that was a better way to manage that expense.
Sean, did you have a question earlier?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? You want to recognize?
Yeah, Heather?
Before we leave this section, there's just a couple of things that I want to point out, especially about the equipment repair, or I don't know if it's equipment, the gear, anyway, all the things that Chief was talking about in terms of the gear. Number one, I appreciate as a select board member and also a taxpayer that he's doing that on a rotation basis and not trying to replace all that gear at the same time. Number two, while I appreciate that he is attempting to save money, I think it's really important that we are protecting our volunteers that are putting their lives on the line for us. And so I just think that it needs to be noted that the fire department should have proper safety.
Yeah, I think the least we can do when someone who makes near minimum wage is going into a burning building is give them the best safety equipment we can. And if you look at the medical issues that people in the fire service have, your issues aren't less because you're a volunteer service member versus a full-time service member. So I just think that safety is important.
I don't think anybody questioned that.
Oh, no, we're not saying anybody is. We're
I
just, you know.
I think it needs to be said out loud, you know, that he's doing a good job making sure that his staff and volunteers are properly protected. And I think it's important to just make sure that that's said out loud.
Any other questions from the committee?
All right, so other public safety, animal control is up 3.7%. Any questions on that line? All right, on to page 13. Public Works. Department heads' wages are 3.5% change. Full-time staff wages are down 4%. Overtime wages are 3.2%. Part-time staff wages are up 51.8%. Payroll tax 91.5%. Health insurance 11.5%. Workers' comp is down 7.4%. Retirement's down 3.1%. Stipends are flat funded at 0%. Training and development is up 50% due to increased training opportunities. Heat's down 4.8%. Electricity is down 12.5%. Telephone and internet's up 4.6%. Other contracted services is up 166%. Added a contractor for gravel road grading twice in 2025 and once in 2026. Equipment rentals are flat funded. Equipment repair and maintenance is flat funded as well. Building repair and maintenance is down 16.7%. Ground maintenance is down 100% because it's moved to building and grounds. Vehicle repair and maintenance is flat funded at 0. Tree service flat funded at 0. Paving and road work is down 33% because we're only having one paving during that timeline. That's correct, Calvin? Yep. Road painting and striping is down 16.7%. Crack sealing is down 11.1%. General supplies are flat. Salt, 2 full winter seasons, so that's up 33%. Same with liquid de-icer, which is up 33%. Winter sand is down 33%. Gravel, asphalt, tar, and concrete's flat funded. Erosion control is down 1%. Signs are at 0%. Culverts are down 33%. Small equipment's down 1%. Do we have any questions on this page before we go to the next? Yes? Oh, sorry.
Joe?
I have 2 questions. Why is full-time staff wages down?
Yeah, so we've been able to really work through our accounting over the last couple of years to really tighten up estimates for things like those costs, and so we're seeing that reflected in the full-time staff wages dropping by 4%. We also had a retirement and then replacement, and I don't believe the person who replaced the retired individual is compensated at the same rate that the retired individual left at. So
Okay.
but
Phyllis?
I had 2
Donna?
questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And the grader, are we renting the grader and the driver, or just the grader?
Can you cover that?
Contracting of a private contract
Yeah.
with grader.
The grader comes with a driver.
Okay, thank you.
It's not automated, it's a human driver.
And so I think I asked this last year about that grader, and I said, well, why can't we just buy one? Like, well, it would be way more than
I bet
this.
I bet if you added a grader to the budget. The
Well, no, I was
department
laughed,
chair wouldn't.
I was laughed down last year too, but, so could we put this in our capital? I mean, could we eventually buy one if we put money aside? And can that grader be used for other things?
I will let Jerry and Calvin answer that question.
I kinda shudder at this price too, because when you grade a road, and you get rain and more rain, it doesn't really last. So at that cost, you're not really getting a good bang for your buck at all. I would encourage the town to look at getting its own grader.
Well, at least putting money
Right.
aside, not all at one time.
Grading gravel road, it just doesn't last, that's why you do them
Right.
twice a year.
Right.
And at that cost, that's a pretty steep cost. And I think Calvin was using Pommel, but, because they have a grader. But to try to get that organized, and they wanna use it, because everybody wants to use it at the same time, and really puts Calvin in a pickle, because if he doesn't get those gravel roads graded, he gets screamed at. They don't have those gravel roads graded, so that's a.
Have you lived on a gravel road? And
Yeah, I live on
understand
one.
why.
So I would encourage the town to look at that in the years to come, because I think that's throwing good money after bad.
Yeah, and I think Calvin can expand on your second part of that question was, can you use the grader more for than just the gravel roads and,
You can do ditching with it.
Yeah.
You can,
So why is the number 40,000? I'm a little confused on that.
It's gonna be twice in 2025 and once in 2026.
So there's other,
Other stuff in there?
there's other stuff in there.
Equipment repairing.
There's engineering, surveying, all that other.
Donna,
Where in this, I didn't see it anywhere, the cemeteries, like Sawyer Cemetery, who's gonna be doing that or what?
Are we there yet?
That's on the grounds.
Is it on the grounds?
And that's moved to the next, that was taken out of here.
Haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, we haven't got there yet?
Haven't gotten there yet. You and Jane need to sit next to each other.
Another
Okay.
page.
Okay.
She's falling
Got it.
asleep.
stay tuned for page 14.
Right, right. We're getting there, guys.
Okay.
Can you educate me, really for Calvin, I think, educate me on how you schedule winter roads plowing? Basically, okay, in the summertime, you work, what, 4 days, 10-hour days?
Yep.
But in the winter, when we have crazy weather like we've been having, it seems like every other day, you gotta plow a road, so how do you schedule that?
You don't, you just look at, this is what we've done the last few years, and you throw it down at the wall and hope you're right. There is no.
Just keeps an eye on the weather, and when the weather comes, they go.
There's gotta be some time though, I mean, normally you'd have 10-hour days, but obviously some of these guys gotta be working more than 10-hour
Oh,
days.
definitely. A lot more than that, yes.
So
15, 16-hour days.
So do you end up taking off a time, another day?
Yeah, like this morning, they were in most of the night, last night treating black ice and freezing rain, and they went home this morning at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, okay. Just curious.
Just to clarify, do you have some people that come in just for plowing, or is it all staff that are doing the plowing?
We have on-call.
Yeah, so
On-call
on-
part-time drivers.
Okay, that's good.
anybody
Mother
else?
Nature does the scheduling for us.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right time, but I guess I will start off by commending, Calvin's picked up a lot of extra duties in the last year. If I'm not mistaken, he's now the cemeteries guy, which sounds like just send the mowers out, but I know they're looking at broken stones. And the other thing that's probably a huge pain in the butt is he's now the building guru, whatever his title is, which I'm willing to bet is a huge pain in the butt. So I don't know if, I guess I'm saying is the pay reflective of that extra duty, stipends and so on and so forth?
I believe the pay got reflected last year for his building supervision, but I'd have to look in my notes.
I don't know. If it didn't, it should, I think.
Well, 23 actual is 73 and 24 actual is 76, so.
Not really. I just throw that out there as something, however you want to call it. I mean, I appreciate chiefs doing extra duties, but I would say Calvin's picked up a couple of extra duties too, if we haven't already considered rewarding that or paying for it, or whatever the right term is.
I can tell you a story.
Yeah.
So when he took over the building and grounds, the interim town manager upped his pay to cover that.
Okay, I thought that it did occur already.
The next year, he didn't want to take a 5% raise like everybody else because he thought this group would crucify him. So he didn't take it.
What group?
The budget committee.
Oh.
You guys are so afraid of us, it's kind of funny. We just ask the hard questions.
He was
We got a guy turning down raises.
Right, so he turned it down, so.
Well, it was the town managers adjusted my pay, and it was the first time I'd ever seen a town manager. We didn't have town managers, so I was like, I don't know if you can do that without going to town meeting or anything. And he said, I can, and I was like, I don't wanna get him in, because he's leaving. If I get before this budget committee and the select board, and they go, what did you do?
He thought the interim town manager was gonna make an adjustment and leave him out to hang when the budget committee came
So
around.
I didn't take
So-
the 5% raise like everybody, I got a 0.
Right.
Rather than have a long discussion, I guess I would just ask the select board town manager is it appropriate this year or not? mean,
I
you don't
think
need
we
to
have
answer
to be
that
a little
tonight.
careful in this forum of discussing publicly
why I said you gotta-
discussing. But if the indication from the budget committee is that they would be supportive of a change and that, we would consider that, so.
Jill?
I don't mean this comment rudely, but you haven't needed our permission before, so I
Yeah.
think it's, I think it's singling out one employee if you're saying you're only gonna have the conversation if we give you permission.
I'm saying that we decided this year to try to go flat because of the 18-month changes. So if the feedback is that the budget committee is supportive of more rather than, coming with a larger number and then getting feedback maybe negative in terms of that number, we just went with that flat to try to be just simpler.
Any other
So-
questions from the committee?
But I
Move
hear
on.
what
We
you're
have
saying.
10 minutes.
Moving along.
Right. And we haven't even got to everyone's page. We keep asking this.
Right.
All right, so we'll move from page 13 to page 14, and we're still in public works. So tools are at 0%, radios are down 20%, 57% increase in uniforms, which is added allowance for part-time employees and department head uniforms. Safety equipment's flat. Miscellaneous equipment's flat. Gas and diesel up 33% because of 2 full winter seasons. Miscellaneous is flat, and the public works total budget is down 3.6%.
I do have a question,
We
Mr.
missed
Chairman.
passing.
On going back to paving, is the 400,000, does that cover 4 miles?
No.
2 miles.
2 points.
It's about $30 a foot, so it covers about 2.5 miles.
Yeah.
So I guess a comment is, if we had a plan of every 10 years, finish 40 miles, we're falling behind off that plan.
Well, he does 2 miles of crack sealing, so if you do both, there's 4 miles.
4 miles, that's my question.
Any other questions? Yes?
Gas and diesel.
Ask away.
47,550, that line.
Yeah, why is that so high?
It's 2 full winter seasons of plowing.
Most of our fuel is used in the winter plowing, it's just not good filling those trucks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
the actual was 35,000, to double that is 70,000, is that not a realistic look at it?
18 months.
I think we're anticipating fuel costs to be higher just per gallon too. So I think that's what that's building in there.
So a lower cost anticipation would make
75.50.
70 more realistic?
So I had 45,000 budgeted, we spent less. I think we got a pretty good deal on fuel this past year, and I don't trust, with all the things going on in the world, I think we would be short-sighted to, I'd want to stay with that 45,000. And 2 full winters at 45 is where you come up with that 90.
As we know, every winter's different in terms of the need. I think Alan pointed out, I hear the plow going by a lot this week compared to the previous week, so.
Yeah.
We asked Mother Nature to give us a forecast for 18 months on her activity, and we didn't get any positive response.
Oh, it's called Farmer's Almanac.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like it's.
Any other questions? All right, moving on.
All right, so municipal buildings, part-time staff wages are up 31% with the cleaning contracting there. Payroll tax is up 48%. That's a small number, even though it's kind of a big percentage. Workers' comp's at 500, heat's at 500. Electricity's down 3.2%. Telephone and internet's down 100%. Other contracted services have been moved elsewhere. Building repairs and maintenance is up 33%. Ground maintenance is flat by the looks of it, and then,
It's new.
Ground maintenance is new. Sorry, 15,000 because of the moving of things, and then streetlights is 0. Security is down 100%. General supplies are down 50%. Flags are up 100% because there's 2 Memorial Days in that 18-month time frame. And then we are at a total change here, municipal buildings of 56%, which is 56.7%, which is annualized at $34,833. Any questions on page 14?
Can you? Sorry.
I'm going back to the ground maintenance, and because I've been asked to ask this question by several people, is that gonna include the Sawyer Cemetery?
Yes.
And any others or anything? How many do you, I don't know, I've been told Sawyer specifically, so I didn't know if there was other ones involved in that.
Oh, we've got a page full of
Do you
other
really?
cemeteries, yeah.
Okay, but Sawyer's in it.
This one's just being added, the new one's just being added.
Okay, thank you.
You're talking about the one across from the high school, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that will be added this year. Well, that's up to the select board. I can't make that decision. I guess that's
High
something that needs to be added.
It's actually not up to the select board, that has to go before the town to vote for the town to accept responsibility
Yeah.
for that cemetery.
Okay.
And we're
Plan on-
budgeting, assuming that that's going to take place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather,
Thank
for
you.
jumping in there.
Jane?
You might have just answered it and I'm too tired to understand it, but the 15,000, is that because cemeteries was moved to ground maintenance?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay,
From
so
public
that's usually around like 7,000, right? I don't know, I'm guessing.
Right, so that was what I just said, is
Mhm.
the Sawyer
Sorry.
Cemetery has come before the select board for the town to take over responsibility for that cemetery. And it has to go before the town to get voted on, but if it's approved, there needs to be a budget to add that cemetery
'Cause-
to the cost of taking care of it.
If we don't
So we're
budget-
budgeting like it's going to be,
Yeah.
that
If
it's
we-
going to be accepted, because if it is, we have to take care of it.
Yeah, and if we weren't to budget for it and then it was accepted, which we anticipate it will be accepted, then we're adding something that we haven't budgeted for maintenance of, so.
So aren't there like 7 cemeteries in the town?
More than that. Yeah. So,
So are you taking over all of them or just?
We already
They
have all the
already
rest.
have.
we have the rest.
All right, that's what I thought.
Other questions?
Don't mind me. I warned you.
page 15.
Before we go forward, I anticipate there could be numerous questions regarding solid waste. Does this committee like to stop here at 9:26? Or do you want to go through solid waste and at the conclusion of that discussion?
I'll just keep going.
Keep it going, solid waste. And then we'll
Do solid waste and then
I ate
after
my
that?
snack, so I'm
All
good
right,
to
we'll do
stay.
one more department.
I'm gonna get her some coffee.
Solid waste, hauling's up 22.7%, that's a 5% increase for 2025, and a 5% increase for 2026 based off of 2024 tonnage. There's no composting line here, but if the town wants to do it, it would be 6,500. Tags is flat funded, just bulky waste day, is up 82.2% and will occur twice in this budget, in May of 2025 and May of 2026. Solid waste is up 24% annualized with $483,867. Any questions about public solid waste?
Alan?
It's interesting, because I have Casella's app on my phone. I just happened to discover it the last couple of weeks. If you go on there, it says that your waste will be out at 6 a.m. and your containers have to be 3 feet apart. And I know that was what they were suggesting in a new contract when they, they were suggesting once they have the trucks that they would be supplying 64-ounce containers for waste and another 64 for recycling. Where do we stand? Did we have the option of opting out on that, or, because didn't we sign like a 3 to 5 year contract?
5-year contract, yep.
So-
They were the only people who bid on the request for
Right, I know, but I'm
contracts,
just
yeah.
wondering, where do we stand with having to abide by?
Yeah, well, this budget doesn't include that for that time frame. I don't think we'd be seeing any of that happening till after this 18-month budget.
Okay.
Is that correct, Jerry, from
Yeah.
what you're being told, so?
They're looking to get started on July of '26.
So, that's a whole different discussion for our next town, not this town meeting, but the first June town meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, Phil?
So on the hauling, is that increase, we have more homes using? it, or-
I gave you all a tonnage report as well here in this here. It's just we have more trash getting picked up. Every year, the amount of trash getting picked up increases, and that's reflected here. And so we're trying to extrapolate that over the next 18 months, so.
Is it because people aren't recycling, and so they're just throwing all the
I just
recyclables
think
in
that
there?
I think that people just are we're seeing a trend of not just recycling or trash. You can see in the report I gave you, people just are getting rid of more, you know. My speculation is a lot of people order a lot of things online, and they get a lot of boxes and a lot of packaging and that sort of stuff.
Go ahead.
So I know that was the theory, but total tons collected has been almost relatively flat
Yeah, well,
since
the
2019.
price increases every year too, by either 5% or the consumer price index, whichever is higher. And so that 5% is reflected there too, so.
Okay.
That's built into the contract, correct?
Yeah, that's baked right in. Every year, we're gonna give you a minimum 5% increase, but if the consumer price increase is higher, you're stuck with that, so. We tried to get other bids, but they kinda got a monopoly on the market.
Any other questions on solid
Page
waste?
16,
We were gonna stop here.
done?
We have 2 more pages. I vote we finish them. Or 3 more pages. I vote we
Well, we
finish them.
don't, I mean, could that mean, it could take 10, 15, 20 minutes, I don't know.
I know. I'm still just putting it
So-
out there, wording it that way.
Anything else to have input?
I'm good to stay.
I'm okay.
That's 3.
I got my
Jane, can
sugar
you
up
stay
with my
awake over
snack,
there?
so I'm good.
That's just too quick.
Okay, hearing nothing about it, go ahead.
General assistant, $1,000, that reflects the new general assistant amounts, and we generally haven't seen that money get removed. People aren't requesting it, most people don't qualify for it in town, and so we're not seeing a need to increase our amount there. And then outside organizations, we remove that line at $16,100 because we feel like that can be allocated out of existing reserve accounts already. And so rather than asking for more money to pay for that, we already have the money that's necessary to pay for that. Do we have any other questions on page 16?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add about, because we're talking about how it never gets withdrawn, but there's an increase in it. You may have seen that the state increased the minimum, and we have to reflect that we're in line with what the state was. So that's why it has.
That's the
been
general
600.
assistance line.
Yes, that's why it has been 600, but now it's up, even though people don't pull from it, we have to align with what the state has.
So where is the money for the Durham Youth Baseball and the snowmobile you approved last week?
We have that money, if those requests come in, would come out of the recreation reserve account, which has $23,742 in it.
Did you vote to give them the money last week?
No,
your last meeting?
I don't believe we voted to give any money to them last meeting. Does that sound familiar to you all?
Hold on, I don't.
Well, it was in your budget and you approved the budget, but.
Well, I think we said that we saw that that was roughly what the request had been in the past. We saw that amount was already existing in the reserve account, so we said we can distribute it out of the reserve accounts rather than allocate a special line for it. So, because we don't want to add $16,000 to this account.
I
If,
thought you voted to approve it. My mistake.
any other questions on other services?
We might have.
No, you didn't.
We didn't.
No.
I thought we voted on transfers out of the.
That was a
Oh,
separate, that was a
okay,
separate,
okay.
yeah.
That was the conversation that we walked and what the theory was behind it, but we didn't take it a
Yeah.
step further into allocation.
We said we already have money for that in the reserve account, so rather than raise it and appropriate it, we just spend out of the existing reserve that's earmarked for it. Page 17, debt services. This is just reflective of the fixed costs of those over the 18 months. So total debt services is down 31%. Then assessed and fixed cost, county tax, it says annualized, down 26%, because we're only paying it once, but the one time we are paying it, we're budgeting for a 9% increase on that. So that's what we're hearing out of the county. We can't control that.
Do you attend meetings?
I don't attend the county meetings, no. So,
We probably should have a Durham representative attend.
yeah, I think that's a good feedback. I don't know if we've had anybody from the select board attend the past. I think that other members of the community have attended. But the thing too is, that's what we're budgeting, but they're not setting their actual rate until after we already committed, right?
They can set their estimate is pretty close, but it's not final yet.
Yeah.
Or at least I haven't heard from the treasurer saying
Yeah.
it's.
I was just gonna say
John?
they approved their budget at 9 point something%.
Okay, yeah, so that's why we got that 9%. But like we said, we only pay that once. Education, we're budgeting for 6.8% increase, so total assessed and fixed cost is 3.1%. Abatement and bad debt, down 100%. Other finance uses, transfer out, this is $598,500, which is annualized at $307,500. This is our fund balance that we're transferring out for various reasons there. And then total townwide is down 3.2%. Any questions on 17?
Shannon?
Yes.
So is it correct to say that the one year county tax is not part of the townwide line on the summary page? So it's really kind of understated.
No, it is.
Is what?
It is
It's in the
included on the
townwide.
summary page.
Yeah.
But 6 months of it's are not.
I'm sorry?
6 months of it's is not. I mean, one of the reasons why the townwide line is down 3.2%, I guess.
Yeah, yes, you're correct. Because it gets only paid once within the 18-month period, then if you were to annualize it, you're missing out on 6 months. But once we go back to a 12-month in FY '27, there's only going to be one payment in that 12-month period as well. So it is what it is when you compare it.
So it's not like you're stuck paying it 0 times one budget and then 2 times the next budget.
No, but the townwide line is understated by $400,000.
In what way?
If it was amortized.
Well, I get your argument, but not really, because we're trying to determine what the total expenditure is going to be for that 18-month period.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, if you're saying, if I wanted to annualize, multiply this actual amount or this budgeted amount from FY '24 by 1.5 and compare it to what would be 18 months worth of county taxes, yes, you're right, that's not an exact comparison.
Okay.
Any other question on page 17? And so you'll see in this transfer out.
No, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
And Neil, that would also apply to, for debt service, that same argument would also apply for debt service principal, because there's, for most of the principal payments are gonna be twice, but the two main municipal bond bank principal payments, they'll only come out once during that 18-month time frame.
So you'll see the notes there in that transfer out. That includes a description, so 307,500 for public works, 270,000 for fire department, 15,000 for building, and 6,000 for grants. And those are earmarked for those reserve accounts. So we finally got to that line.
Well, so what, are you buying anything this year out of those reserve accounts?
I don't think we have, Calvin, do you have any expenditure that you expect out of the reserve accounts this year?
Yeah, we've got 254 for a front-end loader and 87 for a new pickup with plow.
Mm-hmm. And then I don't believe the fire department, I don't see Chief's not here, but he doesn't have anything coming out of that.
So is there, and correct me if I'm not stating it correctly, didn't we have a committee that looked at the 10-year plan and then ranked what items should be
CIP?
purchased?
So there used to be a CIP
Yeah.
committee when there was an annual recommendation for that. But we're now moving into that flat funding on the 10-year line. And then last year at the town meeting was presented the 10-year replacement schedule and expected costs in that time. And then by giving the select board the authority to expend out of those accounts, they can be more variable, because if they don't end up needing the piece of equipment as soon as they think they will, which we've run into at least once last year, we don't have to expend those funds then, so.
Yeah, I'm too bright to even think about it.
That's all right.
Um,
If you think about a way
I
to.
know what Jane's asking. You're looking for, like, is there gonna be a warrant article for this piece of
Yeah,
equipment?
I want people to know, like,
Right, and
hey,
that's
front end
not, that's
loader.
not happening. That changed last year. That was voted on at town meeting, and we're doing level funding. And then as equipment is needed, that comes before the select board, and the select board votes to expend the funds out of the capital accounts to purchase the equipment consistent with the 10-year schedule.
Yeah.
So my personal opinion is there is no transparency there to the average Joe who doesn't listen to the meetings.
We did present last year at the town meeting the 10-year plan, and so that's publicly available. We can give
And
that
we're
to you
gonna
as well.
revisit that every year?
I think it's on the website, so.
We're gonna revisit it every year so that,
Well, we established it in 2024, and so we are confident that that's gonna cover us until our replacement needs until 2020 or 2034.
I get that you have a plan in place, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But I think the townspeople who are ultimately funding this should know what we're spending the money on.
Yeah, and that's on the website, is that 10-year plan, and so.
I get that, but the average Joe isn't gonna go looking for that. I think at town meeting, that needs to be on the floor, that this is where we're spending the funds. I think that's transparency.
Okay, yeah, that's good feedback.
So, you don't each year look at the next year so that there's always a 10-year plan in place? I mean, you gotta
Yes.
wait till
Yeah.
34 and
No.
start over again?
No, so for example, there were some items that were planned to be purchased that in the Public Works CIP that weren't purchased, and so they were simply moved in the schedule in future fiscal years. So what ended up happening was Calvin took a look at what was planned and said, well, we're gonna have to move this to FY '25, or we're gonna move this to FY '27, we're gonna move that to.
So my question is, so right now, there's a plan that we're looking at that went from 2024 to 2034. So wouldn't the reference next year be for a plan from 2025 to 2035?
That's
Are we adding
That's
a
correct.
year each year?
Yeah, and that's what you generally want to do anyways. You want to continually look out another 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, so the department heads are considering that annually.
Yeah, I think that that's really important to have out.
Yeah, well, we'll
Just-
definitely make that presentation
just
again
so
this year.
that people know what's coming next year.
Mhm. Yeah, and so we'll definitely make that presentation again, and I understand your point, like, this sets it up so we don't have to raise and appropriate that money that year for that expense. But I see what you're saying is that if we're just making sure we're vocalizing many different areas, this is what's anticipated to be purchased this year for capital out of that reserve, more so than just what we're announcing at the meeting. So there's a couple different ways we can make sure we do that, and certainly at least build a reminder of that 10-year schedule at our town meeting into our
Neil?
presentation.
So, it's my opinion, I do not want to leave what Durham Baseball Group and the Snowmobile Club and other town groups get for financing up to the select board. I think it should be on the town warrant.
Okay?
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end this meeting. If you have questions, anything about page 18, we'll start with 18. We'll start with page 18 at our next meeting. We'll ask our questions then, and then after that, we'll go back and start discussing the budget and taking motions for recommendations. Our next meeting is scheduled for next Monday. It'll take place here at the fire station. It'll be televised, and the meeting will start at 6:30 p.m. Still work, everybody? Yep. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Good night, everybody.
Thank you.